Hey there, Cinemaster fans! Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The series begins in 2013 on April 7th, with a family waiting at the airport for their flight back home to New York. They hear over the airport microphone that due to booking pressures and schedule changes, some passengers will have to wait for Flight 828, which will depart a bit later. Among the passengers is a police detective named Michaela, traveling to New York with her brother Ben and his son Cal, who is battling leukemia. Cal has a twin sister, Olive, who boards an earlier flight with the rest of the family, leaving Cal on Flight 828. The plane takes off with all its passengers, but before reaching New York, it encounters a severe storm that shakes the plane violently, as if it might be destroyed. The lights go out, emergency lights come on, and the passengers are terrified. Eventually, the weather stabilizes, and the plane returns to normal as it continues toward the airport. However, when the pilot tries to communicate with air traffic control, the controller is shocked upon hearing the flight number, 828. The plane is cleared to land, but military, emergency, and security vehicles are waiting for them. The passengers are informed that the plane took off on April 7, 2013, but disappeared from radar shortly after. The current date is November 4, 2018, meaning the plane has been missing for 5 years. All the passengers were declared missing and presumed dead. The passengers are in disbelief, thinking it must be a prank, but the National Security Agency official, Vance, explains the situation and begins an investigation. Medical examinations reveal that none of the passengers have aged a day, as if they passed through a time anomaly into 2018. The passengers are placed under observation in a camp while being interrogated, but none of them can explain what happened. After 36 hours of investigations, news spreads, and the passengers' families arrive at the airport to reunite with loved ones they thought were long dead. Ben reunites with his now teenage daughter Olive, who has grown taller than him, while his wife Grace is overjoyed to see him and their son alive. However, the joy is short-lived when they learn that Ben's mother passed away 2 years ago. The family returns to a home that has changed over the years, hoping to rest after their ordeal. Meanwhile, the plane is examined for anomalies, but nothing unusual is found. Michaela, worried about her fiancé Jared, goes to the police station where she used to work. She learns from her colleagues, who warmly welcome her back, that Jared has been promoted and is working on a kidnapping case. Michaela also discovers that Jared married her close friend a year ago, leaving her heartbroken. As for her, Jared was still her fiancé from just days earlier. Ben takes his son Cal to the doctor, where they learn that a treatment for leukemia has been developed during the years they were missing, giving Cal hope for a longer life. The family is overjoyed by the news. Meanwhile, Michaela experiences a strange voice in her head while riding a bus, urging the driver to slow down. She yells at the driver to stop, just in time to save a child chasing a ball across the street. Another passenger from Flight 828, a medical researcher, returns to her job and discovers that her pre-disappearance research has been implemented, contributing to cancer treatment. Her colleagues throw her a welcome back pay RTEI. The next morning, Michaela hears the mysterious voice again, urging her to free 2 dogs barking behind a fence. She initially ignores it, but later returns to the location, where she finds her brother Ben, who reveals he also hears the same voice. They decide to free the dogs, but keep the strange phenomenon a secret to avoid being subjected to more tests or experiments. The police later identify Michaela from surveillance footage showing her freeing the dogs. Jared confronts her, but she has no explanation for her actions. The dogs are returned to their owner, who is apologized to by the police. Ben tries to rebuild his relationship with Olive by attending her soccer game, but he approaches cautiously, knowing she had undergone therapy to cope with his disappearance. Michaela and Jared visit the dog's owner to apologize, but when Michaela approaches the dogs, she hears the voice again, urging her to free them. She breaks open a door and discovers 2 kidnapped girls who had been missing for days, and she discovers that the voice was telling her to free the girls, not the dogs. Jared is shocked by what he sees and arrests the kidnapper who tried to attack him, but he eventually captures him. The police forces arrive, and everyone learns what Michaela did. She returns to her job because she was able to solve the case shortly after coming back. At the same time, some people who were on the plane experience severe headaches, and something inside them compels them to head to the airport immediately. When they arrive, they are shocked to find they all arrived at the same time and realize they all felt the same sensation and acted in the same way simultaneously. At that moment, the plane explodes in front of them without any reason or explanation. When the National Security Agency learns what happened and that the explosion occurred in the presence of 20 passengers, they interrogate them all over again. Their answers were identical. They felt they needed to go to the airport without any reason. They were released after 10 hours of questioning, but were placed under surveillance to ensure they were not hiding anything. The next day, one of them hears a certain sound in his head that no one else hears, but he ignores it and goes about his day as usual. He and Grace take their son, Cal, to a chemotherapy session, where they meet Sanvi and learn she was on the flight. They are surprised to find out that Cal is being treated thanks to her cancer research. After the session ends, Ben is walking down the street when he hears the same sound in his head again. He decides to follow the source of the sound and ends up meeting Rad, a street musician who was also on the same flight. Rad tells him he left his son, Audio, when he was 13 years old to travel with his neighbor. Because of what happened on the flight, he was separated from his son for a long time. When he returned to look for him, he found out his son was in prison, and no one was willing to help him see him. Ben asks Jared to help Rad see his son through his connections. When Rad meets his son, Audio tells him he is innocent and was falsely accused of stealing from the jewelry store where he worked. Because Ben believes Audio, he decides to help him and asks his sister to reopen the case and review it herself. However, Michaela finds that all the evidence is indeed against Audio. Additionally, he used a fake ID to get the job in the first place, which confirmed the crime against him. The fake ID was used to secure the job at the jewelry store, which he was accused of stealing from. The next day, Rad visits his son in prison and tells him that all the evidence is against him. But Audio insists he didn't steal anything from the store and only used the fake ID to get a better job than the one he had. He remains adamant about his innocence. That night, Grace brings many new toys for Cal to play with because all his old things were thrown away due to his long absence. Cal has plenty of toys in front of him, but remains upset because he misses his old belongings, like his rock collection and small toys. They discover from Olive, Cal's twin sister, that she kept most of his things in a storage unit far from the house. She couldn't throw them away or donate them because they belonged to her brother. Among the items was something that belonged to Danny, Grace's friend, and her partner during Ben's absence. The storage unit was under Danny's name. Ben learns that his wife was in a relationship with someone else while he was gone. Before they start moving the items out of the storage unit, Ben hears the same sound again. It's a strange ringing, but he feels it's a real ringtone from someone's phone nearby. When he follows the sound, he finds someone standing in front of him with many pieces of jewelry from the store Audio was accused of stealing from. The person standing there is the son of the store owner and the real thief. At that moment, Ben is able to apprehend the thief and informs the police and his sister Michaela, so they can arrest him. Later, Audio is released because he is indeed innocent, as he claimed. Rad is very happy. Michaela is at home and opens her Facebook profile, where she sees her friend's profile. Her friend had always posted about how much she missed Michaela and never forgot her. This reminds Michaela of their friendship, and she starts crying. She decides to visit her friend and talk to her, telling her she forgives her for everything that happened. Meanwhile, Ben learns more about Danny, Grace's friend, and talks to his wife. He tells her he doesn't blame her for being in a relationship after he disappeared. He understands she did it to cope with the hardships and struggles she faced during his absence. Grace is very grateful for his understanding and that he isn't upset with her. Afterward, we are introduced to Kelly, one of the passengers from Flight 828. She becomes the spokesperson for the passengers and appears on many TV shows to speak on their behalf. She frequently blames the government for hiding important information from them and not being interested in uncovering the truth about what happened to them. While Kelly is watching the news, someone comes up behind her and kills her. The police arrive to investigate her murder and the news of her death spreads. Ben fears the murder might be connected to the passengers of the flight, so he warns his wife, Grace, to be careful and to watch over Cal as well. He believes Kelly's murder might be related to her being a passenger on Flight 828. Sanvi tells Ben that there is a strange protein in Cal's blood test results, which appeared after his return from the flight. They decide to keep this information a secret between them so no one else learns about it or its cause. Later, Ben and Michaela go to Kelly's crime scene, but they find Vance there, who prevents them from entering the house. The case is now under the jurisdiction of the U.S. National Security Agency. Michaela tries to talk to Kelly's husband the next day at his house while he is preparing for her funeral. He tells them he is certain his wife's murder is related to the interviews she was conducting and her criticism of the government. Michaela decides she must uncover the reason behind Kelly's death and the murder because it is undoubtedly strongly connected to Flight 828. The murder might hold significant information and an explanation for what happened on the flight. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video.
Welcome to Plot Twists, your place for quick summaries of movies with jaw-dropping twists. Let's dive in. The story begins in an ancient time where humans and other creatures, called orcs, coexist. Wars erupted between them, devastating the land and claiming countless lives on both sides. These wars lasted for a long time, but eventually ended in peace. However, now both sides face a new, mysterious danger, known as the Fel, or green magic. The catastrophe lies in the fact that this magic has affected both sides, causing strange and significant changes in them, turning them into savages. The one narrating this story is Durotan, the leader of an orc tribe, who now feels guilty for bringing his tribe into this danger, unaware of the consequences. At the same time, his wife Draka, heavily pregnant in her last months, is by his side. He tells her to hide her pregnancy because they must travel to a new war. The next morning, all the orc tribes gather to prepare for war. Durotan speaks with his friend Orgrim, telling him that all the orc tribes are ready and equipped with massive forces. Orgrim responds, saying it looks like a war of annihilation. Then we see Gul'dan, the terrifying creature who is their leader and the source of the green magic. He gathers them all to deliver a speech, explaining that the fuel for his magic comes from the souls of living humans. Therefore, they will invade new lands and take all the souls there. He announces that they now have enough souls to give them the strength needed for this new war. Suddenly, a green light appears, extracting the souls of people trapped in cages, forming a massive portal between the mountains using the power of these souls. Gul'dan orders everyone to pass through it. The orcs rush toward the portal, and when it is Durotan and his pregnant wife's turn, he enters first, followed by her. However, she experiences immense pain as she crosses to the other side, revealing her pregnancy to everyone. Durotan runs to her, but Gul'dan's assistant, Blackhand, stops him, scolding him for bringing his pregnant wife. At the same time, Draka goes into labor, and Gul'dan himself assists her. She gives birth to a boy, but unfortunately, the baby is still born due to the magic's energy they cross through. Gul'dan takes the child and uses the soul of a deer wandering nearby to restore the baby's life. Everyone rejoices, and Gul'dan declares that a new warrior has joined their army. The scene shifts to a distant city where a strong warrior named Lothar is at a weaponsmith's shop. The smith offers him a new weapon resembling a gun, but firing explosives instead of bullets, capable of destroying anything in its path. Lothar takes the weapon to examine it. At that moment, they receive a message from the city's king, informing them that their cities are under attack, and their people and soldiers guarding the borders are being killed. Lothar realizes he must return to the capital to fulfill his duty in the army. He goes to investigate the dead soldiers and learns that an entire squad was killed in a strange and brutal manner. Even stranger, they detained a man who was examining the corpses. Lothar goes to interrogate him and discovers a peculiar mark on the man's armor, identifying him as a mage. The mage casts a spell to protect himself and requests a chance to examine the last corpse, claiming it holds the secret to identifying who attacked the soldiers. Lothar agrees, and as the mage examines the body, green smoke suddenly emerges from it. The mage insists they must immediately summon the guardian Medivh, but Lothar tells him only the king can summon the guardian. They head to the capital to inform the king. At the king's palace, the king questions his advisors about the gruesome deaths and the abductions of survivors. The mage named Khadgar explains that the secret lies in the green magic, shocking everyone. He reveals that he is a mage trained by a powerful master and came here because he sensed the presence of evil that threatens to destroy everything. He urges them to summon the guardian Medivh immediately to save them. While they are talking, a nearby city is attacked and set ablaze by the enemy. The king orders Lothar to go to the guardian and gives him the royal ring as a sign of authority. Lothar takes Khadgar with him, and they use one of the king's giant birds to travel quickly. Meanwhile, Gul'dan and his forces finish conquering a new city, capturing its inhabitants to harvest their souls. Durotan, however, is unhappy with these actions, seeing them as dishonorable and destructive. At the same time, Lothar and Khadgar arrive at the Guardian's fortress and meet Moroes, the Guardian's assistant, who takes them to meet Medivh. Khadgar marvels at the fortress's size and its vast library of books. Inside, they find Medivh sculpting a massive clay statue, which he plans to animate with magic and name Golem. Lothar delivers the king's message, urging Medivh to come to the palace. Medivh, however, questions Khadgar about his presence and discovers he has been secretly studying a forbidden book. As Khadgar examines a particular book, a dark smoke emerges and the Guardian confronts him. Khadgar explains that the green magic is a powerful and dangerous force that feeds on human lives and souls, granting immense power but harming anyone who comes near it. Realizing the threat, Medivh decides to accompany them to the king to prepare for the impending war. He creates a magical circle that transports the three of them to the royal palace of Lothar. When they arrive at the palace, Lothar welcomes Medivh and takes them to the war meeting room. They begin to discuss the information they have gathered about the enemy, which consists of massive giant creatures. However, they do not know their strength or their connection to the green magic. They express their desire to capture one of them to understand their true nature. Medivh responds by saying he will devise a plan to capture capture a few of them. Indeed, he sets off with Lothar, Khadgar, and a group of soldiers to the city that the enemy recently attacked. When they arrive, they find the place eerily quiet, with nothing but human corpses scattered everywhere. They stop by a tree marked with traces of green magic. Suddenly, an axe flies towards one of the soldiers, killing him instantly. They realize they are under attack, and the soldiers prepare to defend themselves. Out of nowhere, a group of orcs descends upon them, brutally killing the soldiers one by one. During this time, Khadgar stands beside Medivh. When one of the orcs tries to approach them, Khadgar casts a spell to create a large barrier to protect them from the enemies. Simultaneously inside the barrier, Medivh casts a larger spell to eliminate all the green magic in the area. Meanwhile, the soldiers outside the barrier continue fighting the orcs, with Lothar fiercely battling them. Lothar's son, who is among the soldiers, is nearly killed by an orc, but Lothar saves him at the last moment. Durotan is also present in the battle and is astonished by what is happening. Suddenly, Medivh's spell activates, eliminating all the orcs infused with green magic, leaving only Durotan and one other orc alive. Durotan mounts his horse and flees quickly. Curiously, after successfully casting his spell, Medivh strikes the ground with his staff and leaves the area quickly to return to his fortress. Lothar takes a few soldiers with him to pursue Medivh. During the chase, they manage to capture one of the orcs after knocking him unconscious. Meanwhile, another orc approaches Khadgar, who is standing alone. However, Khadgar casts a spell to bind the orc to a tree until Lothar arrives. Thus, they capture two of the giants and return with them to the palace to study them. On the way back, Lothar attempts to communicate with the larger orc, asking him who they are and why they are attacking their lands. However, the orc does not understand his language. One of the female orcs, who can speak their language, responds and translates. She reveals that they came through a magical portal created by Gul'dan, and that she learned their language from human captives, whom the orcs used to feed on their souls. The king asks her if the captives are still alive, to which she replies affirmatively. The king then demands that she show them the location of the portal so they can rescue the captives. When she refuses, she is imprisoned. Meanwhile, Durotan and his companion return to Gul'dan, who mocks them for their weakness and for losing to humans despite their strength. Durotan informs Gul'dan that the victor of the battle was someone using green magic similar to his own. Gul'dan is surprised, stating that no one else uses that magic but him. Back in the dungeon, the female orc, Garona, is approached by the king's wife, who is also Lothar's sister. She offers Garona clothes, food, and drink, trying to win her over. Garona, moved by her kindness, agrees to reveal the location of the portal. Elsewhere, Durotan confides in his companion, Orgrim, expressing his disapproval of Gul'dan's destructive actions. He suggests allying with the humans and their mages to take down Gul'dan and restore the orc people's honor. Garona and Lothar prepare for their journey to the mysterious portal, accompanied by Khadgar and a group of soldiers. During their journey, Garona reveals that her name means the cursed in her language and shares her tragic past, including how her mother was killed because of her birth. The next morning, they arrive at the portal's location and assess the number of orcs and the captives' positions. Garona explains that Gul'dan is waiting for a larger portal to be completed to bring more orcs into the city. If the portal opens, everyone will be in grave danger. Lothar decides they must return to the palace to inform the king and prepare. During this time, Garona is alone with Khadgar when Durotan appears, restrains Khadgar, and delivers a message to Garona. He asks her to arrange a meeting between him and the king at the Black Rock to discuss an alliance against Gul'dan. Garona agrees to deliver his message to the king. Meanwhile, Medivh arrives at his fortress, visibly weakened by the effects of the green magic. His assistant advises him not to return to the battlefield, but Medivh insists that the kingdom needs his power now more than ever. At the same time, representatives from various cities in the kingdom gather for a meeting with the king to discuss solutions to the orc threat. Lothar arrives and shares the new information he has learned about the orcs, emphasizing that now is the time. It is the time when all forces must unite, and suddenly a message arrives for Lothar. He learns from it that his son was injured in the recent war. He rushes to his son to check on him and finds him well and unharmed. He asks his son to take care of himself because he has no one else in the world. The son agrees. After that, they all gather with Garona, who conveys a message from Durotan. However, Lothar is certain it is a trap set by Durotan to lure the rest of his people and kill the king. But Garona tells them that Durotan was the tribe's leader and had always been honorable and kind. Eventually, the king agrees to meet him to understand his exact intentions and asks Garona to accompany them, giving her a royal weapon. At the same time, Khadgar enters a room and finds the guard inside. He sees all the drawings Khadgar made about the green magic. When Khadgar tries to show him his findings, the sorcerer gets angry, burns all the drawings, and tells him to stay away from the green magic and focus solely on protecting the king. Fortunately, Khadgar had hidden another drawing and quickly goes to Lothar to tell him what happened with the guard or sorcerer, showing him the hidden drawing. He explains that one of the orcs is inside the city and is the one who summoned them, and they need to find out who that person is. They begin suspecting Medivh due to his recent strange and frightening behavior. They then head to meet Durotan and his tribe, while Medivh stays atop the mountain to protect them. He tells them that the deadly magic used by Gul'dan is destroying everything, including their world. Therefore, they need to eliminate him. The king agrees to bring his men and attack their camps, instructing the soldiers to distract Gul'dan's guards so that Duratan and his men can enter and kill him. The king agrees, but it becomes evident that the treaty won't last because Gul'dan's men suddenly appear and attack them. The king, Lothar, and their companions realize it was an ambush and flee. However, Duratan tries to prove his honesty by fighting Gul'dan's men. Meanwhile, the soldiers battle the monsters attacking them, and Medivh begins creating a magical barrier to protect them. Unfortunately, when he casts it on the orc monsters, Lothar's son, Callan, ends up inside the barrier. Lothar tries to enter to save his son, but fails. He calls out to Medivh, but Medivh is not in his right mind. When Blackhand, Gul'dan's assistant, sees Callan and learns he is Lothar's son, he grabs him by the neck and kills him with his claw in front of his father. Lothar feels he has lost everything in his life. At the same time, Khadgar and Garona search for Medivh and find him atop the mountain. They take him back to his stronghold. The shocking revelation occurs when Khadgar looks into Medivh's eyes and sees them glowing green, realizing he has been corrupted by the green magic. He leaves to find a solution at the Mages' Council, knowing who brought the orcs to their world. Meanwhile, Duratan returns to his tribe to protect them after they accused him and his men of treason. Blackhand confronts him, calling him a traitor and demanding he surrender to protect his tribe. Duratan bids farewell to his wife, asking her to name their son Goel, and leaves with Blackhand. When Medivh regains consciousness, he finds Garona beside him. She tells him what happened to Lothar's son, making him suspicious of her. He tells her to stay by Lothar's side and creates a portal for her to reach it. However, Medivh begins to weaken again. Meanwhile, Gul'dan tries to turn all the orc tribes against each other to sow hatred among them. He asks Orgrim, Duratan's friend, to become the tribe's leader instead of the traitor Duratan. Orgrim attacks Duratan's tribe to take control, but gives Draka, Duratan's wife, a chance to escape with their son. She flees, but feels betrayed by her friend and leader. Khadgar reaches the Mages' Council and tells them what happened to Medivh. Suddenly, a portal opens, and Khadgar sees the same black smoke he saw earlier in the library. An old woman appears, telling him that Medivh is fully corrupted by the green magic and will destroy the world unless stopped. She warns that he will become a powerful demon. Khadgar admits he can't stop him alone, and she advises him to collaborate with his allies. Strangely, her eyes also glow green, indicating the magic has corrupted her too. Back with Medivh, he collapses, and his assistant places him in the energy pool to revive him. However, the pool turns green. Medivh apologizes to his assistant, confessing that the green magic corrupted him, led him to summon the orcs, and caused harm to many people, becoming a curse to everyone. His eyes turn black, and he takes on a terrifying appearance, absorbing his assistant's soul to sustain himself. The king prepares his soldiers for an attack on the orc city, but Lothar strongly opposes the plan. Suddenly, Medivh appears, seemingly rejuvenated, and provokes Lothar with words about his deceased son, leading to a fight between them. Medivh convinces the king to imprison Lothar, claiming they can protect the kingdom without him. Garona bids farewell to Lothar before joining the battle, promising not to trust Medivh and to protect the king. Meanwhile, Orgrim feels guilty and releases Duratan from captivity. After ensuring his wife's safety, Duratan prepares to confront Gul'dan. Elsewhere, the king prepares his soldiers for battle, leaving his wife and son behind, sensing he might not return. Khadgar returns to free Lothar, using magic to turn the guard into a sheep and creating a portal to Medivh's location. He informs Lothar that Medivh must be stopped immediately. Meanwhile, Draka flees with her son, but is pursued by Gul'dan's men. She places her son in the water to save him and confronts her pursuers. Although she fights valiantly, she is fatally wounded. Duratan gathers his men and friend to face Gul'dan, and he calls out to him and says, "Come fight me." So Gul'dan agrees, and a battle begins between them. They are not supposed to use magic, but in reality, Duratan manages to strike him blow after blow. However, Gul'dan retaliates with great force and hits him hard. Meanwhile, Gul'dan and Lothar arrive at Medivh's castle and find that his assistant is dead. Suddenly, Medivh appears, but he looks terrifying. He restrains Lothar and also strikes Khadgar. Medivh begins chanting a spell to open the portal for the orcs, and Khadgar tells Lothar they must stop Medivh immediately. At the same time, Gul'dan is forced to end his battle with Duratan, so he drains Duratan's soul and throws him aside. Everyone calls Gul'dan a cheater in the fight, but no one can stop him. When Duratan dies, they all declare themselves against Gul'dan. Gul'dan revives the spirits he had captured to intimidate the rest. Blackhand, the great beast, prepares for the arrival of King Lane's army, which has finally reached the battlefield. Meanwhile, Medivh continues his spell, and Khadgar and Lothar try to stop him. Medivh moves his massive statue to keep them away and continues his incantation. The army strikes fiercely against the orc monsters. Garona fights with all her strength to save the king. At the same time, Gul'dan absorbs more souls and summons a larger army of orcs. Back at the castle, Khadgar devises a new plan to defeat Medivh. He asks Lothar to distract Medivh while he prepares a powerful spell. Lothar successfully distracts Medivh, who tries to kill kill him. It becomes apparent that Medivh is resisting the evil within him, but ultimately fails, transforming into a terrifyingly massive creature. Khadgar's spell succeeds, causing the massive statue to fall on Medivh, killing him. Unfortunately, Khadgar also falls into the lake and is affected by the green magic. In the last moment, he manages to create a protective circle around the ruins to shield them. He completes his spell on Medivh's head to remove the green magic. With an incredible burst of energy, the entire castle is engulfed, and the green magic is eradicated from both Garona and Medivh. The orc portal disappears. In a final act, Medivh chants a spell with his last breath to open a rescue portal for King Lane and his army. Lothar rushes to save his king in the battle. Meanwhile, Garona hurries to free the prisoners so they can escape through the portal. Sadly, the mage dies and the portal closes. The orc army reappears, now including Blackhand, who has become much stronger and more monstrous. He begins throwing soldiers left and right like chess pieces. The king realizes it's the end, with no chance of survival. He tells Garona to take the honor of killing him at the right moment to stop the war between humans and orcs by taking leadership after his death. Garona struggles with this decision and is unable to do what he asks. However, when she sees him fighting Blackhand and on the verge of death, she draws her sword and kills the king. She is then lifted up and celebrated by the orcs. At the same moment, Lothar arrives on the royal griffin and starts killing the orc monsters. He is shocked to learn what happened and realizes he arrived too late. He immediately declares Garona a traitor and takes the king's body to return it to the kingdom. However, he is stopped. Lothar doesn't forget his old grudge against the one who killed his son. He faces him with great strength and manages to defeat him completely, finishing him off. He brings him to the ground saying, "I avenged my son." Gul'dan becomes furious and orders Lothar to be killed, but surprisingly, no one obeys his commands. Instead, they all salute Lothar for winning the battle. Garona stops Gul'dan and tells him he must abide by the rules and treaty between humans. Lothar returns to the kingdom with the king's body, still in disbelief about what Garona did. He tells Khadgar about Garona's betrayal, but Khadgar insists she must have done it for a reason, as Garona is not a traitor. In the kingdom, the king is buried, and Lothar takes over leadership until the king's son grows up. Their struggle against evil continues, and they remember their kind King Lane. The final surprise is when someone finds Draca's son in the water. They take him and raise him to become the new leader of the orcs, and that's the end. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button so you never miss an update.
Hey there, Cinemaster fans! Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The series begins with a young man named Omar, a Senegalese immigrant in Italy. He works at a pizza shop called Sandakan. His job is delivering orders. We see Omar trying to escape from a guy named Sharif, a resident of the working-class neighborhood he lives in. Omar explains to us that he was almost invisible to people and no one noticed his presence, until recently. Omar reaches a place to hide from Sharif, who is chasing him with a gun. Then we flash back in time and see Omar as a child playing with his mother. She gives him a very special gift, a bracelet she made for him. She tells him it's magical and assures him that if he keeps it, they'll always be together. In the present, we see Omar at work, explaining that no one notices him. Just like most people living in working-class neighborhoods populated by immigrants, where nothing changes except for a statue of a migrant placed in the middle of the neighborhood. Omar returns home, wakes up his sister to go to school, and talks to his father, who tells him the government is planning to redevelop the neighborhood. We learn that Omar speaks Italian, while his father still speaks the local Senegalese dialect. But their lack of understanding isn't just about language, it's deeper than that. Omar's father mentions receiving a letter from the new owners of their apartment, who plan to raise the rent and evict them. Omar tries to reassure his father that they'll find another place to live, but his father gets angry, telling him he worked his whole life to raise them in this place. Omar apologizes, saying he didn't mean to upset him, but his father accuses him of being like his mother, never caring about his roots. Omar goes to his room, sees a painting of his mother, and tries not to look at it because he's afraid of painted portraits. He starts listening to music, feeling happy because he's finally alone and can draw. We learn that Omar loves drawing comic book stories featuring black characters like himself. When he draws, he feels like he doesn't need anything else. Omar returns to work and delivers a pizza to a homeless man named Dimitar. The pizza shop is covering the cost of the pizza. Dimitar eats it quickly, and Omar warns him to slow down so he doesn't choke. Dimitar says he won't die because he's a superhero. When Omar asks him about his superpowers, Dimitar explains that people don't notice him, so he knows everything about everyone, including Omar. This unsettles Omar, who leaves. Dimitar asks him to tell Sandakan to use less oregano in the pizzas. Later, Omar arrives at another delivery location and sees two girls leaving. They seem upset, saying their friend brings negative energy and repeats the same mistakes. Omar enters the house to deliver the pizza and overhears a girl named Anna arguing with her boyfriend, Edo, who thinks she'll never change. She accuses him of acting childish. When they come downstairs, Omar tries to talk, but it's clear they don't notice him. Anna follows Edo outside, accidentally locking Omar in the apartment. When she returns, she's startled to see Omar. He apologizes, explaining he's the pizza delivery guy. Anna realizes she locked him in and apologizes, saying she'll get the money for the order. Omar tells her the pizza might be cold by now. Anna suggests he stay with her for a while. Later, she tells Omar about dreaming of a famous architect, which inspired her to study architecture. Omar starts to develop feelings for Anna, thinking she's the most beautiful girl he's ever seen. Anna asks if he'd give up his dream just to please someone he loves. Omar tells her the problem lies with her boyfriend. If he truly loves her, he'd let her follow her passion. Anna apologizes for talking too much and asks Omar to share something about himself. He tells her his parents are from Senegal, but he was born in Italy and lives in a working-class neighborhood. However, he wouldn't recommend anyone live there. Anna realizes Omar dislikes his neighborhood because of the vandals who set motorcycles on fire. Omar insists he doesn't mind living there. Anna tells him he's wrong, explaining the broken window theory. She says if someone lives with a broken window, they'll eventually accept it. When another window breaks, they'll think it's fine to live in a house with multiple broken windows. Over time, they'll find themselves living in a completely broken-down place. Anna emphasizes the importance of taking steps to improve one's life. Omar agrees, saying he's been trying to do just that. He reveals he's considering moving to Belgium to pursue his dream of drawing comics. Anna is happy for him but learns he hasn't saved enough money for the trip yet, nor has he told his father or sister about his plans. She realizes Omar dreams big, but struggles to make them a reality. When Omar returns to his neighborhood, he sees a motorcycle on fire. Inspired by the broken window theory, he decides to take action and tries to put out the fire. At that moment, Sheriff sees him and assumes he's the one who set the bike on fire. Sheriff chases Omar with a gun. Omar hides in a garage, holding his mother's bracelet. When Sheriff enters, he discovers Omar has disappeared. The next morning, Omar arrives at work and is shocked to see Sheriff there. Sandokan tells Omar that Sheriff found his bike. Omar tries to stay calm as Sheriff approaches him, saying he just wants to talk. Sheriff compliments Omar's drawing skills and shows him the sketchbook where Omar had drawn him, a picture of a superhero named Zero. Omar assures Sheriff that he wasn't the one who burned his motorcycle. Sheriff tells him the motorcycle doesn't matter. He just wants to know how Omar managed to disappear. Omar insists Sheriff is mistaken, because that didn't happen. Sheriff replies that he's never wrong, as he's sure Omar vanished in a second from where he was. He asks if Omar is a magician or a ghost, but Omar doesn't answer. Omar thinks he's wasting his life working at a pizza shop, unaware of the power he possesses. Sharif asks Omar to teach him how to disappear because they need to work together. At that moment, the shop's phone rings, and Omar asks Sharif to leave because he's busy. Sharif warns that Omar won't be able to get rid of him. Omar leaves and is surprised when Sandokan informs him the phone call was for him. He's shocked to find out it was Anna who called, inviting him to dinner. Noticing Omar's happiness, Sandokan decides to give him the rest of the day off. Omar goes home and starts preparing to visit Anna's house. He practices in front of the mirror, repeating, "How are you, Anna?" At that moment, his sister O and her friend Ruby enter, greeting him. They notice he's wearing his father's cologne and realize he's dressing up to meet a girl. O teases him, asking who the lucky girl is, leaving Omar embarrassed as he quickly leaves. When Omar arrives at Anna's house, he's stunned to find out she's invited about 100 other people. He searches for her and discovers the party is for her birthday. When Anna spots him, she asks him to come upstairs to her room. She shows him a design project she's been working on, explaining it's a test project for her engineering studies in France. Omar is impressed, and Anna tells him the design took her 300 hours to complete and even caused her breakup with her boyfriend. Omar is happy to hear they broke up and asks if she's in love. She replies that this is a strange time in her life. Omar thanks her and shares that he's been saving for 5 years to travel abroad, but hasn't found a way to talk to his father about it. Until now, thanks to her. Anna asks for his phone, saves her number, and tells him to call her once he tells his father about his travel plans. Omar asks her to call him too when she's confident in her project and ready to present it to the university because he thinks it's amazing. Anna leaves to rejoin the party, but she notices her ex-boyfriend Ed there. She becomes upset and doesn't understand why he's there. She starts talking to him, while Omar watches her from afar, feeling disappointed when he sees them hugging and realizes they've reconciled. Omar returns home and stands outside his father's room, trying to gather the courage to tell him about his travel plans. At the last moment, he hesitates and decides to back off. Just then, his father calls him, saying he wants to talk. His father assures him he's now a grown man who can be relied upon, which is why he needs his help. Omar goes to his room, thinking about how hard it will be to tell his father he wants to leave the path his father has laid out for him and travel abroad. As he starts taking money out of his savings, he hears his sister O crying. He goes to her and asks why she's upset. She tells him everything is over because they don't have enough money and the landlord is going to evict them. She says she'd rather die than move to another place. Omar tries to comfort her and hugs her. She tells him her whole life is here, her school, her friends, and her volleyball team. She also blames him for thinking about leaving. Omar tells her he could take her with him to Paris, making her laugh. She points out that his father's cologne scent is still on his clothes. Omar asks what her issue is with the cologne, and she asks him how things went with Anna. At that moment, she notices his bracelet is missing. When she asks about it, Omar is shocked and remembers taking it off when he was trying to escape Sheriff. He rushes out to search for it, but Sheriff has already found the bracelet and decides to keep it. When Omar arrives and doesn't find the bracelet, he recalls the moment the police took his mother away. He disappears and reappears again, all while Sheriff secretly watches, confirming that Omar has superpowers. Meanwhile, a group of vandals is seen breaking and burning things in the pizza shop and destroying the neighborhood statue. Dimitri intervenes, asking why they're doing this, but they decide to damage his car and harm him. The next morning, the police arrive to investigate the neighborhood's destruction. They decide to search Sheriff's friends, suspecting them. Sheriff's friends mock the police, saying they can't catch the real culprits and accusing them of being responsible for the neighborhood's troubles. Omar is seen cleaning the pizza shop with Sandokan when he receives a message from Sheriff, who insists they need to talk because he saw what happened at the garage. Sheriff warns Omar not to deny it and promises not to leave him alone. Later that night, Dimitri arrives and asks Omar if he can sleep in the shop. Omar tells him it's not possible because they've just finished painting, and it might get ruined. Dimitri says Fidel Castro tried to harm him the previous night. Omar brushes it off as a joke and advises Dimitri to sleep in the subway tunnels where no one can hurt him. Dimitri insists he doesn't care and leaves. Omar delivers a package to Anna's house. When Anna opens it, she finds a comic book about a beautiful, unique girl and an ordinary boy with no chance of being together. But the boy believes they'd be amazing if they were. Omar returns home and asks O and Ruby to lower their voices because their father is sleeping. At that moment, Ruby hugs him, thanking him because she didn't know how she'd live if O had to leave. Omar is surprised by her reaction and asks O about it. O tells him she told Ruby that he paid the rent, apologizing because their father took his money without telling him. Omar storms out angrily to confront his father, asking how he could do that without his permission. His father reminds him that he said they needed his help. At that moment, a power outage hits the neighborhood. His father and O leave to investigate, leaving Omar alone. He feels sad and frustrated. Sheriff and his friends arrive at Omar's house. When Omar tries to shut the door on them, Sheriff shows him the bracelet. They enter and demand 10,000 euros to fix the electricity. Omar gets upset and asks for his bracelet back. Sheriff assures him they're not thieves and returns the bracelet. They start searching his house and notice a painting Anna made. Sheriff asks if Anna is his girlfriend. Omar explains he sent her a comic book, but she hasn't responded yet. Sarah suggests he send her a message, assuring him it's a guaranteed way to get a response. When she discovers that, he sends her a message saying, "How are you?" mocking him. But at that moment, he gets a reply from Anna and finds out they might meet. Sharif and his friends start celebrating him, assuring him that this is the benefit of having friends. He asks how they are friends when he doesn't even know them. Sharif begins introducing them to him, starting with Sarah, who works as a music producer and owns a studio and a car, and Momo, whom Sarah considers her brother because they grew up together in an orphanage. Then there's Kino, a football player who dreams of playing for the Italian national team. Sharif begs him to agree to help the people in his neighborhood. The next morning, Omar is seen heading to the address Anna sent him. When he enters, he asks if this is her house. She informs him that it's her friend Carolina's house because her own house is too small, and she couldn't continue her project there. She tells him it's her first time appearing in a graphic story and assures him that he's the special one, not her. He realizes that she's the special one, but she insists again that he's the special one. At that moment, Carolina arrives, and they ask her to join them at a poker party. Carolina refuses because she doesn't want to meet Ado. Anna tells her she doesn't agree to go either. Carolina tries to convince her because the prize is between 20 and 30,000 euros. At that moment, Sharif sends Omar a message asking how things are going with his girlfriend. Unfortunately, Omar's phone glitches and sends the message multiple times, embarrassing him. He decides to leave, but Anna follows him, assuring him again that he's special. Omar leaves happy and goes to check on Dimitar, only to discover he's dead. He recalls Sharif's words about needing to help his neighborhood and feels regret because Dimitar tried to make him understand, but he refused. At that time, Sharif arrives and suggests to his friends that they organize a charity party to raise the needed amount. Sarah insists they can't hold a party without electricity because they need lighting. Omar arrives wearing a t-shirt with the character Zero drawn on it. He informs them that he found a way to raise the money and asks if they know how to play poker. Sharif starts training them on how to play poker, but it becomes clear that Omar doesn't understand anything. Sharif assures him that all he needs to do is hand them matching cards. Sarah asks if he's sure he can disappear. Sharif confirms that he saw him disappear before, but Omar admits he can't control his ability to vanish. Feeling discouraged, Sharif tries to reassure them that they'll find a way. Omar tells his friends that he's only managed to disappear twice in his life. Sharif asks how he managed to vanish in the garage. Omar explains he doesn't know, but he remembers feeling scared because Sharif was threatening him with a gun. Momo tells him that fear is what triggers his ability to disappear. They try to throw him off the roof to test this theory, but Sarah stops them, arguing they can't scare him every time they need him to vanish. Sharif asks about the second time he disappeared and how he felt then. Omar reveals he felt angry. Sharif concludes that emotions and feelings trigger his ability to disappear. They gather around him as he trains to summon his emotions to vanish. Sarah suggests he think of something positive or a happy memory that makes him feel like he's flying. He takes her advice and successfully disappears. Sharif then explains the plan to win the poker game. They learn from their contacts that they have a large collection of matching playing cards. Sharif asks Omar to steal a set of cards, sneak in using his invisibility, and register their names on the players' list. Sharif, Sarah, and Momo arrive at the poker hall and discover that Omar has registered their names to play with VIPs. They start playing, and Omar uses his invisibility to help them see the cards of their opponents, allowing them to win big. Meanwhile, the hall manager enters the control room and is informed by the surveillance staff about strange interference on the cameras and a boy and girl playing at the VIP table who have won more than the game's credit limit. The manager decides to intervene personally. Omar becomes nervous when he sees her, and his anxiety increases when he sees Anna. He realizes he's returning to normal and quickly withdraws, informing Momo, who is thrilled because a musician at the party gave him his card and asked him to contact him to record rap songs. Omar tells Momo to hurry and informs Sarah and Sharif that he can't vanish again and that they should withdraw from the game before ruining everything. Omar meets Anna and asks why she's there when she didn't want to come. She tells him she's wondering the same thing and suggests they leave together. Meanwhile, Sharif bets all the money they've won and, luckily, wins without Omar's help. Security searches Sharif to ensure he's not cheating and informs him he can't leave with the large amount he won. Momo intervenes and they manage to escape together. Sarah is surprised by their reaction but decides to gather the money they've won. Sharif feels discouraged, but Momo reminds him they were very close to winning. Sharif admits he won without Omar's help. Sarah surprises them by revealing she collected the money, amounting to around 14,000 euros. Sharif goes live on social media to reassure the neighborhood residents that, with Sarah's studio's help, they raised the money needed to restore electricity to the area. He assures those trying to destroy the neighborhood that they won't give up because it's their home and community. Omar is at home, visibly distressed. When Anna notices his tension, she asks if he's okay. He admits he's not and tries to tell her his secret, but hesitates at the last moment. The next morning, Omar asks his father where he was when the police arrested his mother. His father insists he was at home. Omar accuses him of lying, saying he saw him hiding in his mother's car. His father slaps him and warns him not to speak to him that way. Furious, Omar retreats to his room to pack his things and leave. Anna asks him what he's doing and tells him she's not feeling well and that her eyes are burning. At that moment, his father enters, takes Omar's ID card, and tells him he won't be able to go far without it. He asks Omar to talk to him when he calms down. Meanwhile, Sharif enters Sarah's studio and is shocked to find it vandalized and the equipment stolen. He goes inside to comfort Sarah, and he sits thinking they will come back to steal. So she blames him because he caused what happened due to the video he posted, accusing him of liking to play the role of an important young man. He is stupid, and after a while, Amr arrives and helps Sharif organize the studio. He asks about what happened and learns that the vandals are taking revenge on them because they decided to fix the electrical faults with the money they won from poker. Amr is surprised because they won, and Sheriff confirms that they really did win. He blames him for disappearing when he saw his girlfriend. Amr realizes he is thinking of speaking the truth because he disappeared suddenly while with her and couldn't return. He feels his situation is worsening due to the fight between him and his father, and considers traveling but doesn't want to leave the neighborhood at this time, so the vandals won't defeat them. In the morning, Amr is with his friends and tells them that Demeter, before he died, said Castro was the one who attacked him. They try to explain that he was crazy and said illogical things, but Amr insists he is confident that the one who attacked Demeter had Castro's tattoo. Sarah informs them that her friend Cinzia, who designs tattoos, might help them find the man they are looking for. Cinzia gives them an address, and when they arrive, Amr decides to disappear to enter the house and identify the tattoo owner. When he gets out of the car, he runs and manages to vanish easily. His friends are impressed by his developing abilities. Amr enters the house of a man named Rico and confirms he is the tattoo owner. He overhears him talking to a real estate company and learns they are the ones who hired him to destroy the neighborhood. Amr decides to leave but encounters Rico's daughter, who asks how he appeared suddenly. He assures her it's a magical trick and she asks him to teach her. He tells her she needs to focus and she will be able to disappear. At that moment, Rico comes down and Amr runs into the bathroom. His daughter informs Rico that someone is hiding in the bathroom. Rico enters with a gun, and terror shows on Amr's face. He is afraid to reveal himself suddenly and get killed by Rico. Later, Amr leaves with the statue of the immigrant that was in the neighborhood. Sheriff helps him and considers him a genius. They return to the neighborhood and celebrate their success in retrieving the statue's head. Aina arrives, and Sheriff tells him he missed a lot by not being with them. He admits their achievement and Sarah confirms it's all thanks to Zero. At this point, Sheriff decides to celebrate and upload pictures with the statue on Instagram. Sarah intervenes and stops him, reminding him they are fighting real criminals who want revenge. She asks him to stop playing the role of the neighborhood's hero and insists that everything must remain secret among them. Amr agrees with Sarah, but informs them that Rico and his men are not the decision-makers in what's happening in the neighborhood. He reveals that Serenita Real Estate Agency is the one paying Rico to destroy the neighborhood. Sarah explains that rents are increasing and vandalism is escalating, meaning the agency wants them to leave the neighborhood. When Sarah returns to the studio, she is surprised to find all her equipment restored, and it turns out Sharif managed to retrieve them. In the morning, workers from the neighborhood arrive to reinstall the statue's head. Amr and Sheriff try to speak with the police officer, informing him they know the person who stole the statue's head. The officer asks if they want to file a lawsuit against him. They confirm it's a Cuban immigrant trying to ruin their lives. The officer gets upset and asks them to leave. They decide to declare war against the real estate agency and inform the neighborhood residents about their involvement in the vandalism. They vandalize the agency's sign, writing that they oppose its ethics. In the morning, Sharif talks with his brother Hani, trying to convince him to stop stealing money because it belongs to the team, not just him. Hani gets angry and tells him he must choose between him and his friends, warning that if he chooses his friends, he will consider him an enemy. Amr arrives at the competition venue and is surprised to find all the contestants dressed strangely like comic book heroes. He is happy to see Anna and discovers she is the one who invited him. He greets her, and she tells him she has already booked tickets. Anna joins him, and it becomes clear she admires the artist's costumes. When she approaches them, Amr warns her they might be annoyed if they realize she noticed them. She tells him they are dressed that way to attract attention. Amr suggests they might be dressed like that to hide their true identities. She asks him not to talk about disappearing. She notices someone from the judging panel alone and asks Amr to approach him to present his paintings. The judge asks if his paintings are realistic or imaginary. Amr confirms all his paintings are realistic and that his heroes are the residents of the neighborhood. He shares that the neighborhood sometimes feels like a mere fantasy to him, and he considers escaping it. He starts talking about the neighborhood, and Anna is deeply impressed by his words. Amr emphasizes that all his heroes were born and raised in the neighborhood and found themselves responsible for defending it against attacks from dangerous people. At that moment, Sharif is shocked to see the police raiding his house and arresting his brother Hani for drug dealing. Hani accuses Sharif of reporting him and choosing his friends over him. Sharif denies it, but the officer confirms that the neighborhood will never change and will always be against the law. He promises that investors will take over the neighborhood, leaving no place for immigrants like him. We return to see Amr, who learns from the judges that his paintings are beautiful. They give him their card to bring more artwork. Anna is happy and surprised that Amr has fallen in love with the neighborhood again. He confirms he just realized it. She asks if he still considers traveling, and he tells her that wherever he is, he will always love her. They start celebrating, growing closer to each other. Later, Anna decides to invite Amr to dinner to meet her father. Amr feels unprepared to meet her father, but she assures him it's just dinner and that he doesn't need to propose formally yet. Amr meets Anna's father, Richie, who tells him she talks about him all the time. Richie says he thought she was talking about architecture. Amr assures him she talks about both architecture and him. Richie invites them to dinner on his account. When Richie notices Amr is nervous, he reassures him that dinner will be on him. We see Amr with Richie in the car, discussing how comic books are real art. Richie deliberately calls Anna Serenita, shocking Amr when he realizes Richie is the manager of the real estate agency. She is fighting the residents of the popular neighborhood and wants to evict them from their homes. He gets nervous and asks them to get out of the car because he has to go to work. Richie suggests they drop him off. He gets even more nervous and asks them to get out at the nearest spot. At that moment, Sheriff feels frustrated when he sees workers repairing the Serenita Agency sign. Suddenly, Rico arrives and threatens him with a knife, telling him it took a long time to find him. Sheriff resists and informs him that they confirmed he is one of the criminals hired by the agency owners to destroy the neighborhood. He realizes he shouldn't have involved Hani in their conflict. Rico starts beating him until he bleeds. In the morning, Sarah tries to convince Sheriff to go to the hospital because he needs stitches. He tells her he doesn't want to attract police attention and asks her to distribute the files she has to their friends. He also asks them to monitor Rico and photograph anyone associated with the agency. Omar discovers that Anna's father's picture is among them. He informs them that they don't need to monitor Rico because they can contact him by phone. Sheriff insists that this is impossible and that all they need to do is monitor them, and if they see them together, they should document it. Omar later realizes this isn't necessary, which angers Sharif, who becomes curious about the change in Omar's behavior. Anna decides to visit the neighborhood and meets Omar, informing him that she will travel to France for her studies. When she notices his lack of enthusiasm and asks why, he assures her it doesn't matter where they are because he loves her. He tells her there's something else he wants to ask her. She asks him to say whatever is on his mind. He asks if she knows her father is trying to evict the neighborhood's residents. She assures him she didn't know until she entered the neighborhood, saw the sign, and understood her father's agency was involved. She insists her father is a skilled businessman who builds beautiful things and that renewing the neighborhood would benefit the residents. He explains to her that things are not as they seem because her father hired a gang to destroy the neighborhood. When she shows disbelief, he tells her that when the neighborhood is destroyed, property prices will drop, allowing her father to buy at very low prices. He informs her that his friend Sheriff was beaten, Sarah's studio was vandalized and robbed, and the gang caused chaos, broke statues, cut electricity, and even killed Demtar. He assures her that her father is responsible for all of this. She insists her father is an honest man and asks him for proof of his claims. He tells her that in time, everything will be revealed. She acknowledges that real estate projects might face opposition but argues that this doesn't make her father a criminal. He accuses her of disbelief. To present his paintings, the judge asks if his paintings are realistic or imaginary. Amr confirms all his paintings are realistic and that his heroes are the residents of the neighborhood. He shares that the neighborhood sometimes feels like a mere fantasy to him, and he considers escaping it. He starts talking about the neighborhood, and Anna is deeply impressed by his words. Amr emphasizes that all his heroes were born and raised in the neighborhood and found themselves responsible for defending it against attacks from dangerous people. At that moment, Sharif is shocked to see the police raiding his house and arresting his brother Hani for drug dealing. Hani accuses Sharif of reporting him and choosing his friends over him. Sharif denies it, but the officer confirms that the neighborhood will never change and will always be against the law. He promises that investors will take over the neighborhood, leaving no place for immigrants like him. We return to see Amr, who learns from the judges that his paintings are beautiful. They give him their card to bring more artwork. Anna is happy and surprised that Amr has fallen in love with the neighborhood again. He confirms he just realized it. She asks if he still considers traveling, and he tells her that wherever he is, he will always love her. They start celebrating, growing closer to each other. Later, Anna decides to invite Amr to dinner to meet her father. Amr feels unprepared to meet her father, but she assures him it's just dinner and that he doesn't need to propose formally yet. Amr meets Anna's father, Richie, who tells him she talks about him all the time. Richie says he thought she was talking about architecture. Amr assures him she talks about both architecture and him. Richie invites them to dinner on his account. When Richie notices Amr is nervous, he reassures him that dinner will be on him. We see Amr with Richie in the car, discussing how comic books are real art. Richie deliberately calls Anna Serenita, shocking Amr when he realizes Richie is the manager of the real estate agency. She is fighting the residents of the popular neighborhood and wants to evict them from their homes. He gets nervous and asks them to get out of the car because he has to go to work. Richie suggests they drop him off. He gets even more nervous and asks them to get out at the nearest spot. At that moment, Sheriff feels frustrated when he sees workers repairing the Serenita Agency sign. Suddenly, Rico arrives and threatens him with a knife, telling him it took a long time to find him. Sheriff resists and informs him that they confirmed he is one of the criminals hired by the agency owners to destroy the neighborhood. He realizes he shouldn't have involved Hani in their conflict. Rico starts beating him until he bleeds. In the morning, Sarah tries to convince Sharif to go to the hospital because he needs stitches. He tells her he doesn't want to attract police attention and asks her to distribute the files she has to their friends. He also asks them to monitor Rico and photograph anyone associated with the agency. Omar discovers that Anna's father's picture is among them. He informs them that they don't need to monitor Rico because they can contact him by phone. Sheriff insists that this is impossible and that all they need to do is monitor them, and if they see them together, they should document it. Omar later realizes this isn't necessary, which angers Sharif, who becomes curious about the change in Omar's behavior. Anna decides to visit the neighborhood and meets Omar, informing him that she will travel to France for her studies. When she notices his lack of enthusiasm and asks why, he assures her it doesn't matter where they are because he loves her. He tells her there's something else he wants to ask her. She asks him to say whatever is on his mind. He asks if she knows her father is trying to evict the neighborhood's residents. She assures him she didn't know until she entered the neighborhood, saw the sign, and understood her father's agency was involved. She insists her father is a skilled businessman who builds beautiful things and that renewing the neighborhood would benefit the residents. He explains to her that things are not as they seem because her father hired a gang to destroy the neighborhood. When she shows disbelief, he tells her that when the neighborhood is destroyed, property prices will drop, allowing her father to buy at very low prices. He informs her that his friend Sheriff was beaten, Sarah's studio was vandalized and robbed, and the gang caused chaos, broke statues, cut electricity, and even killed Demtar. He assures her that her father is responsible for all of this. She insists her father is an honest man and asks him for proof of his claims. He tells her that in time, everything will be revealed. She acknowledges that real estate projects might face opposition but argues that this doesn't make her father a criminal. He accuses her of disbelief. Kelly's murder might be related to her being a passenger on Flight 828. Sanvi tells Ben that there is a strange protein in Cal's blood test results, which appeared after his return from the flight. They decide to keep this information a secret between them so no one else learns about it or its cause. Later, Ben and Michaela go to Kelly's crime scene, but they find Vance there, who prevents them from entering the house. The case is now under the jurisdiction of the U.S. National Security Agency. Michaela tries to talk to Kelly's husband the next day at his house while he is preparing for her funeral. He tells them he is certain his wife's murder is related to the interviews she was conducting and her criticism of the government. Michaela decides she must uncover the reason behind Kelly's death and the murder because it is undoubtedly strongly connected to Flight 828. The murder might hold significant information and an explanation for what happened on the flight. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Communicate with them. Omar begins to speak and tells them he couldn't leave before meeting them, and that they taught him the meaning of homeland to the extent that he sees them in his imagination as superheroes. Momo strong like a rock, Sarah fast like the wind, agile like a tiger, and Sheriff the smart one whose intelligence sometimes betrays him. But no one in the neighborhood is without flaws. Sheriff decides to apologize to them because he took their money for his brother. Sarah slaps him, which is her way of forgiving him. Omar returns to the neighborhood and finds Anna waiting for him. She tells him she doesn't want her father's money and that she had a fight with him, left the house, and will stay with her friend until it's time to travel. She suggests he travel with her to Paris and asks him to imagine becoming a comic book artist while she becomes a famous engineer. Omar tells her that's his dream, but unfortunately, he can't travel. Omar then goes to meet his friends and assures them they are a step ahead because they know all their enemies. They agree to start the fight against the villains trying to evict them from their homeland. In the morning, we see Omar with his friends at the hospital. The policewoman meets them and informs them that Momo managed to upload the video before being stabbed, and thanks to him, they were able to arrest Rico and Richie. Omar decides to go to the police station and learns that Richie was released. Richie is shocked when he sees him and asks what his connection is to everything happening. Richie is confused about how Omar managed to do all this and why. Omar assures him they are defending themselves. Richie tells him that by doing this, he's destroying Anna. Omar tells Richie he can't make him feel guilty because Anna is his daughter, and he's the one who ruined her life. Omar reassures Richie that Anna can live without his wealth, but Richie insists it's not just about money because the company is registered in her name. Due to what happened, she could end up in jail or become a victim of his partners. Richie reveals he's merely a front for people who hate losing their money and accuses Omar of putting his daughter in a predicament she can't escape. Omar assures him he's unaware of the problems she'll face, but he will help her with all his strength. Omar returns to the neighborhood and finds his friends gathering all the residents. He tells them he's the hero who saved them and prevented the real estate company from taking their homes and raising rents. At night, sadness appears on Omar's face. Sarah asks him if he told Anna about Anna. He tells her Richie said she's entangled with very rich and dangerous people because of what happened to the company. Momo assures him he must act, go to Anna, and try to save her. If he needs help, they will stand by him because they are strong. Omar arrives at the house of Anna's friend Fadia and is shocked to see Anna being kidnapped. We learn that the gang leader who kidnapped her is the Virgin, the owner of the poker hall. Omar uses his powers and disappears to find out where Anna is being taken. The Virgin arrives and meets Kawa, who is crying because she lost a volleyball match due to her eye strain. The Virgin asks her not to cry to avoid straining her eyes further and gives her a handkerchief, telling her that if she wipes her eyes with it, they will improve. Indeed, her eyes improve when she uses the handkerchief. The Virgin tells her she can keep it, even though its effects don't last long, but it's better than nothing. Kawa asks who she is, and the Virgin tells her name and that she knows a lot about her and her brother. Kawa asks the Virgin what her connection is to what's happening. The Virgin assures her she'll understand everything in time and advises her not to suppress her emotions when she's in pain. At this moment, Omar decides to enter and rescue Anna. He uses his powers, but one of the kidnappers suddenly appears and frightens him. Omar falls and loses consciousness. He wakes up to free Anna and tells her he can disappear. He knows it doesn't make sense, but they need to move immediately. Another gang member enters and manages to hit Omar, but Omar escapes with Anna. He feels uneasy about the paintings in the house. He sees his mother move out of one of the paintings and tells him he can embrace those he loves at any time. Omar decides to embrace Anna and makes her disappear with him, successfully escaping the house. At that moment, the police arrive. Anna tries to convince them she needs to go inside because her lover is in the house, but Sharif reassures her and asks her to get into the ambulance. Anna tries to move to touch Omar, and he holds her hand to reassure her he's with her. Anna reaches the hospital, and Omar hugs her, telling her he's with her and can't return to normal. He asks her to travel together when she recovers. As they leave, they encounter the Virgin, surprised that she can see him. Hey there, Cinemaster fans! Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The series begins with a young man named Omar, a Senegalese immigrant in Italy. He works at a pizza shop called Sandakan. His job is delivering orders. We see Omar trying to escape from a guy named Sharif, a resident of the working-class neighborhood he lives in. Omar explains to us that he was almost invisible to people and no one noticed his presence, until recently. Omar reaches a place to hide from Sharif, who is chasing him with a gun. Then we flash back in time and see Omar as a child playing with his mother. She gives him a very special gift, a bracelet she made for him. She tells him it's magical and assures him that if he keeps it, they'll always be together. In the present, we see Omar at work, explaining that no one notices him. Just like most people living in working-class neighborhoods populated by immigrants, where nothing changes except for a statue of a migrant placed in the middle of the neighborhood. Omar returns home, wakes up his sister to go to school, and talks to his father, who tells him the government is planning to redevelop the neighborhood. We learn that Omar speaks Italian, while his father still speaks the local Senegalese dialect. But their lack of understanding isn't just about language, it's deeper than that. Omar's father mentions receiving a letter from the new owners of their apartment, who plan to raise the rent and evict them. Omar tries to reassure his father that they'll find another place to live, but his father gets angry, telling him he worked his whole life to raise them in this place. Omar apologizes, saying he didn't mean to upset him, but his father accuses him of being like his mother, never caring about his roots. Omar goes to his room, sees a painting of his mother, and tries not to look at it because he's afraid of painted portraits. He starts listening to music, feeling happy because he's finally alone and can draw. We learn that Omar loves drawing comic book stories featuring black characters like himself. When he draws, he feels like he doesn't need anything else. Omar returns to work and delivers a pizza to a homeless man named Dimitar. The pizza shop is covering the cost of the pizza. Dimitar eats it quickly, and Omar warns him to slow down so he doesn't choke. Dimitar says he won't die because he's a superhero. When Omar asks him about his superpowers, Dimitar explains that people don't notice him, so he knows everything about everyone, including Omar. This unsettles Omar, who leaves. Dimitar asks him to tell Sandakan to use less oregano in the pizzas. Later, Omar arrives at another delivery location and sees two girls leaving. They seem upset, saying their friend brings negative energy and repeats the same mistakes. Omar enters the house to deliver the pizza and overhears a girl named Anna arguing with her boyfriend, Edo, who thinks she'll never change. She accuses him of acting childish. When they come downstairs, Omar tries to talk, but it's clear they don't notice him. Anna follows Edo outside, accidentally locking Omar in the apartment. When she returns, she's startled to see Omar. He apologizes, explaining he's the pizza delivery guy. Anna realizes she locked him in and apologizes, saying she'll get the money for the order. Omar tells her the pizza might be cold by now. Anna suggests he stay with her for a while. Later, she tells Omar about dreaming of a famous architect, which inspired her to study architecture. Omar starts to develop feelings for Anna, thinking she's the most beautiful girl he's ever seen. Anna asks if he'd give up his dream just to please someone he loves. Omar tells her the problem lies with her boyfriend. If he truly loves her, he'd let her follow her passion. Anna apologizes for talking too much and asks Omar to share something about himself. He tells her his parents are from Senegal, but he was born in Italy and lives in a working-class neighborhood. However, he wouldn't recommend anyone live there. Anna realizes Omar dislikes his neighborhood because of the vandals who set motorcycles on fire. Omar insists he doesn't mind living there. Anna tells him he's wrong, explaining the broken window theory. She says if someone lives with a broken window, they'll eventually accept it. When another window breaks, they'll think it's fine to live in a house with multiple broken windows. Over time, they'll find themselves living in a completely broken-down place. Anna emphasizes the importance of taking steps to improve one's life. Omar agrees, saying he's been trying to do just that. He reveals he's considering moving to Belgium to pursue his dream of drawing comics. Anna is happy for him but learns he hasn't saved enough money for the trip yet, nor has he told his father or sister about his plans. She realizes Omar dreams big, but struggles to make them a reality. Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. The series begins in a small town where Mayor Bonnie is seen ringing the town bell at sunset. The townspeople hear the bell and each one rushes to their home. The shops close and the streets are completely deserted. The deputy mayor, named Ken, returns to the clinic where his father, Mr. Lone, who has Alzheimer's, is located. Ken sits with his father and they play chess together. At the same time, Mayor Bunny strolls through the city's streets to ensure they are completely devoid of people, then returns to his home. There is a hanging board containing statistics on the number of incidents that occurred each day. After that, the mayor touches a stone bearing a strange symbol hanging on his door. It turns out that every house in the city has the same stone hanging on its door. In one of the houses in the city, Lauren appears, living with her daughter, Megan, and her husband, Frank, who has not yet returned home. Time passes, and everyone hears the sound of the city bell. Lauren starts closing the doors and windows, very worried about her husband, who is actually unconscious from drinking at one of his friends' houses. Lauren takes her little daughter, Megan, to her room and helps her get ready for bed, where Megan prays to God before falling asleep. Suddenly, Megan hears the voice of an old woman calling her from the window, telling her that she is her grandmother. Megan opens the curtains and sees the old woman, so she tells her that she is not her grandmother. But the old woman begs her and tells her that she is lonely and needs someone to keep her company. Lauren enters the room to find Megan talking to the old woman, and she orders her not to open the window. But it's too late as Megan opens the window. Suddenly, the old woman transforms into a terrifying monster and attacks them. On the highway, a family of 4 is seen driving a motorhome. The family consists of the father Matthew, the mother Tabitha, their eldest daughter Julia, and their youngest son Ethan. They were on their way to a family trip, but Matthew feels that they have lost their way. He keeps driving all night. The next day, Frank returns home to find a large group of residents and police officers gathered around his house. As soon as he sees the mayor, he grabs him and takes him to show him what happened to his wife and daughter. The mayor scolds him harshly for leaving his family alone at home, emphasizing that a man's primary responsibility is to protect his family. Then he shows him the bodies of his wife and daughter, which were horrifically disfigured. At the same time, Matthew encounters a dead end due to a large tree, so he tries to turn around and go back. In the city, the mayor visits a famous house known as Colony House, where a person named Donna lives. The mayor tells her that his presence there is temporary and that he only came to talk to his son. The mayor enters the house and finds his son, Ellis, who works as a painter. Ellis was painting a beautiful girl named Fatima. As soon as Fatima sees the mayor, she hugs him and leaves him to talk to Ellis privately. It is clear that the relationship between the mayor and his son is not going well. The mayor tries to bring up any topic to talk to Ellis, so he tells him about the incident that happened to Lauren and Megan. But Ellis shows no interest in talking to his father. The mayor leaves the house feeling sad and frustrated, and the residents prepare to bury the bodies of Lauren and Megan. On the road, Matthew finds himself on an unknown path with no network coverage. He arrives with his family in a strange city. Matthew gets out of the car and asks Tessa to close the doors. He starts asking about the highway, but the townspeople show great fear at the sight of new faces, and no one answers him. The mayor arrives with Kenny, and they notice Matthew's mobile home. They discover that his family is with him. Then they describe the highway to him. Matthew thanks them and resumes his journey, but he notices that he is going in circles and cannot leave the city. He meets a girl from the town named Sarah, and he asks her about the highway, but she gives him a strange look and leaves without answering. Matthew continues driving until he sees a car swerving in front of him. He tries to avoid it, but loses control of his car and gets into an accident. After the accident, he finds his son Ethan injured in his foot, while his wife is unconscious, and his daughter Julia is in good condition. In the second car, the driver named Toby gets out and discovers that he too is going in circles and cannot leave the area. Toby has a minor injury, but he is trying to reach the city. In the meantime, he meets the mayor, who was standing on the road, and takes him to the clinic. The mayor rushes to the scene of the accident and finds Toby's friend, The mayor rushes to the scene of the accident and finds Toby's friend, who was in the car with him, named Jed. But he is in a state of severe intoxication, so the mayor decides to arrest him. While Toby is in the clinic with nurse Sarah, she tries to calm him down and assures him that the incident was not his fault. Suddenly, Sarah pulls out a screwdriver and stabs him in the neck, leading to his death. The mayor calls paramedic Christy, who was at Lauren and Megan's funeral with Ellis. Christy asks Ellis to accompany her to help the mayor save Matthew's family before nightfall. When they arrive at the scene, Christy finds that Ethan has a serious injury to his leg. She tells the mayor that stitching the wound will take an hour. The mayor asks Matthew and the rest of the family to return to the city before dark, but Matthew refuses to leave his family. Tabitha wakes up and is in good condition, so Matthew asks Christy to cut the protective stone and distribute it on the car. When they ask him why he is using the stone, he explains that he is trying to protect the car from dangers. The mayor and Matthew stay with Christy until she finishes treating Ethan, while the others return to the city. After an hour, Christy finishes stitching the wound, and they hurry back before complete darkness sets in. They go to the nearest house, which is Colony's house. The mayor closes the doors and windows, but suddenly notices a group of people around the mobile home. He orders everyone in the house to lower their voices. Meanwhile, Ethan has a severe seizure, and his body starts shaking, making a loud noise. Suddenly, a group of people approaches the house, screaming for help. Matthew tries to open the door to save them, but the mayor stops him and warns him that the people outside are not real, even though they seem so. Matthew doesn't understand the mayor's words, but soon everyone realizes that the people outside are Alice, Julia, Tabitha, and Kenny. Another group approaches the house, and Julia tries to call for help, but Kenny shoots one of them. The surprise is that the shots don't affect them. Everyone is terrified and continues knocking on the door. Donna decides to open the door for them, and they enter the house. The mayor orders everyone to be separated into rooms to ensure they are real. Fatima goes to talk to Julia and tries to calm her down, then takes her to Alice's room and shows her his drawings. She tells her that after sunset, strange creatures appear in human form, trying to lure those inside their homes to come out, and then they kill them. At home, Christy hears whispers and scratches on the walls of the house and everywhere. She feels extremely scared, but the mayor calms her down and tells her not to delude herself with imaginary things. And elsewhere in the house, Donna sits with Tessa and tells her about the monsters that make them close the doors and windows every night. Donna tells her about the day she arrived in the city with her sister and how they encountered the strange creatures on their first night. She explains that they tried to shoot these creatures, but they were unaffected by the bullets. In the end, her sister died because of those creatures, and she tells Donna that she was lucky because the mayor saved her before sunset. In the clinic, Sarah screams after killing Toby. It is clear that she feels regret, as if she was forced to do it. She returns home and takes a shower to wash away the blood. Later, her brother Nathan arrives and asks her about dinner, but she breaks down and tells him she had no other choice. In the clinic, one of the nurses is sitting with Mr. Liu, Kenny's father, and the deputy mayor. The nurse goes upstairs where she finds Toby dead on the bed with a screwdriver embedded in his neck. Suddenly, she notices that the door is open and finds a group of strange creatures smiling in front of it. The nurse feels a great terror and rushes to the basement where Mr. Liu is and quickly closes the doors. The next morning, Kenny goes to check on his father at the clinic. He finds the doors open and discovers that the nurse and his father have been brutally murdered. Kenny feels intense anger and leaves the clinic in a state of collapse, but the mayor tries to calm him down. In Sarah's house, Sarah confesses to her brother Nathan that she left the clinic door open because of the whispering sounds she was hearing. She says she had no other choice but to do that. In the Colony house, Julia sits with Ethan and tells him a story, but Ethan is lost in thought as he looks out the window. He sees a small boy waving at him from afar, and he is the only one who sees him. As for Jade, who was drunk, he wakes up and asks the residents of the house about everything that happened, but he doesn't believe a word of what they say. He decides to leave the house and starts wandering around the city. The Matthews family finally decides to move into a new house to live in by themselves. The mayor accompanies them to a house that seems empty, but it's the same house where Lauren and Megan died. Tabitha discovers what happened to the previous family that lived in the house, but she insists on staying there nonetheless. And then she sees a strange box outside the house, so she asks about its story, and they tell her it's the box where Frank will be punished because he left his family alone and was the reason for their death. And at the Colony house, Ethan steps outside and sees a man named Victor, one of the oldest residents in the city, who seems very eccentric. Ethan stops to talk to him and asks him what he is doing. Victor replies that he is trying to find out if the trees have moved from their place or not. Ethan tells him that he saw a strange child smiling at him and pointing at him from outside the house, and that he is looking for him. Victor is puzzled, and before he can respond, Julia interrupts him, seeing her brother talking to the strange Victor, and asks him to come back home. And before Ethan leaves, Victor tells him to say hello to his mysterious friend. In the city, Jade wanders around trying to find any exit, and he sees an underground cellar, thinking it might be a secret escape from the city that no one can leave. But suddenly he sees before him disfigured and devoured corpses, and he feels an intense terror and quickly runs away. But he remembers that his friend Toby might be responsible for these incidents, so he returns to Colony's house. Everyone starts gathering outside the house, and the mayor asks all the people who are not from the town to choose between living in the Colony house or in the town. The Massey family chooses the city, except for Julia, who chooses to stay in the Colony house. After that, Jade arrives and starts mocking them, but Kenny shows him Toby's corpse, and Jade believes him and realizes that everything happening is real. He decides to live with Kenny and his mother in their house. Then Matthew's family moves to a new house, while Julia stays in the colony house. And before sunset, the townspeople gather in front of Frank's house, where he will be punished by being locked in the box for abandoning his family. The mayor is hesitant in his decision, but Frank believes he deserves punishment and feels guilty for losing his entire family. Frank enters the box, and everyone goes back to their homes. And suddenly, Frank sees the strange creatures outside the box approaching him. He feels extreme terror, but resigns himself to his fate. The creatures break the box and attack him until he is killed. We go back in time to Victor as he recalls his memories from when he was a child, on the day he emerged from an underground cellar and found corpses everywhere around him. In the future, Julia wakes up from her sleep in the colony house to find Victor sitting in front of her, watching her. Then he shows her his drawings, and she feels scared of him and doesn't know how to deal with him. After that, Julia sees a girl from the same house wearing her shirt that was in her bag. Julia feels intense anger but tries to hide it and allows the girl to take it. In the city, the mayor goes to the box where Frank was imprisoned, only to find it broken and sees Frank brutally murdered. He removes his body to bury it, cleanse the place, and then rebuilds the box anew. After that, they take Frank's body to bury it, and the priest sees in his house that he is the reason for Frank's death, and that the idea of the punishment box was his suggestion. The priest tells everyone that they must listen to him, and he explains that he is the one who came up with the idea of the stones that carry a charm to protect houses from evil creatures. He also came up with the idea of the bell and designed the city's protection system, claiming that without his measures, the city's residents would have all died. In the city restaurant, Nurse Sarah works there alongside her other job. Sarah sees Mrs. Lily crying over her deceased husband, and Sarah is deeply affected because she knows she is the reason for his death. In Matthew's family home, the family members are trying to adapt to their new situation. Ethan wakes up from his sleep and asks for something sweet, so Matthew takes him to the restaurant. While they are there, Matthew leaves Ethan alone for a while. Meanwhile, Ethan sees Victor sitting and drawing. Ethan approaches him and asks what he is drawing, to which Victor replies that he is drawing the incident that happened to him in his childhood and trying to recall his memories through drawing. Then Victor tells Ethan about the trees that move, and he says they move every Wednesday in a strange way. Then Victor shows Ethan a drawing of a small child and asks him if it is the child he saw outside Colony's house. It becomes clear that the child in the Matthews family finally decides to move into a new house to live in by themselves. The mayor accompanies them to a house that seems empty, but it's the same house where Lauren and Megan died. Tabitha discovers what happened to the previous family that lived in the house, but she insists on staying there nonetheless. And then she sees a strange box outside the house, so she asks about its story, and they tell her it's the box where Frank will be punished because he left his family alone and was the reason for their death. And at the colony house, Ethan steps outside and sees a man named Victor, one of the oldest residents in the city, who seems very eccentric. Ethan stops to talk to him and asks him what he is doing. Victor replies that he is trying to find out if the trees have moved from their place or not. Ethan tells him that he saw a strange child smiling at him and pointing at him from outside the house, and that he is looking for him. Victor is puzzled, and before he can respond, Julia interrupts him, seeing her brother talking to the strange Victor, and asks him to come back home. And before Ethan leaves, Victor tells him to say hello to his mysterious friend. In the city, Jade wanders around trying to find any exit, and he sees an underground cellar, thinking it might be a secret escape from the city that no one can leave. But suddenly, he sees before him disfigured and devoured corpses, and he feels an intense terror and quickly runs away. But he remembers that his friend Toby might be responsible for these incidents, so he returns to Colony's house. Everyone starts gathering outside the house, and the mayor asks all the people who are not from the town to choose between living in the Colony house or in the town. The Massey family chooses the city, except for Julia, who chooses to stay in the Colony house. After that, Jade arrives and starts mocking them, but Kenny shows him Toby's corpse, and Jade believes him and realizes that everything happening is real. He decides to live with Kenny and his mother in their house. Then Matthew's family moves to a new house, while Julia stays in the Colony house. And before sunset, the townspeople gather in front of Frank's house, where he will be punished by being locked in the box for abandoning his family. The mayor is hesitant in his decision, but Frank believes he deserves punishment and feels guilty for losing his entire family. Frank enters the box and everyone goes back to their homes. And suddenly, Frank sees the strange creatures outside the box approaching him. He feels extreme terror but resigns himself to his fate. The creatures break the box and attack him until he is killed. We go back in time to Victor as he recalls his memories from when he was a child, on the day he emerged from an underground cellar and found corpses everywhere around him. In the future, Julia wakes up from her sleep in the Colony house to find Victor sitting in front of her, watching her. Then he shows her his drawings, and she feels scared of him and doesn't know how to deal with him. After that, Julia sees a girl from the same house wearing her shirt that was in her bag. Julia feels intense anger but tries to hide it and allows the girl to take it. In the city, the mayor goes to the box where Frank was imprisoned, only to find it broken and sees Frank brutally murdered. He removes his body to bury it, cleanse the place, and then rebuilds the box anew. After that, they take Frank's body to bury it, and the priest sees in his house that he is the reason for Frank's death, and that the idea of the punishment box was his suggestion. The priest tells everyone that they must listen to him, and he explains that he is the one who came up with the idea of the stones that carry a charm to protect houses from evil creatures. He also came up with the idea of the bell and designed the city's protection system, claiming that without his measures, the city's residents would have all died. In the city restaurant, Nurse Sarah works there alongside her other job. Sarah sees Mrs. Lily crying over her deceased husband, and Sarah is deeply affected because she knows she is the reason for his death. In Matthew's family home, the family members members are trying to adapt to their new situation. Ethan wakes up from his sleep and asks for something sweet, so Matthew takes him to the restaurant. While they are there, Matthew leaves Ethan alone for a while. Meanwhile, Ethan sees Victor sitting and drawing. Ethan approaches him and asks what he is drawing, to which Victor replies that he is drawing the incident that happened to him in his childhood and trying to recall his memories through drawing. Then Victor tells Ethan about the trees that move, and he says they move every Wednesday in a strange way. Then Victor shows Ethan a drawing of a small child and asks him if it is the child he saw outside Colony's house. It becomes clear that the child in the Then Victor shows Ethan a drawing of a small child and asks him if it is the child he saw outside Colony's house. It becomes clear that the child in the drawing is the same one Ethan saw. Matthew sees this scene, gets angry, and tells Victor to stay away from his son. Matthew returns home in a state of anger. Elsewhere, Jade returns to the basement he saw earlier with Kenny, but he finds no bodies or signs on the ceiling. Jade tries to convince Kenny of what he saw, but Kenny doesn't pay much attention to his words and asks him to come with him to the mayor's office. In the Colony house, Tabitha visits her daughter Julia and asks her to come back home with them, but Julia gets angry with her and tells her that she knows they don't want to stay together and that they are planning to divorce after her brother Thomas's death. Julia says she doesn't want to be part of that family, and she leaves her mother's house feeling sad. In the mayor's office, Jade arrives with Kenny, who shows him the city map and tells him that everyone who travels through the city road never leaves it. Jade feels confused and can't believe what's happening, so he asks why. Kenny replies that trying to understand the truth might drive a person insane. Jade gets extremely angry and hears strange sounds coming from the radio next to Kenny. He unplugs the radio and takes it with him as he leaves the place. In the Matthews family's house, Tabitha is arguing with her husband, which shows that their relationship is not good. At this time, Ethan is sitting alone in his room, and Victor comes to talk to him through the glass. Victor asks him to come out to talk, and Ethan leaves without his parents noticing. Victor tells him that they need to search for the child Ethan saw. Ethan asks him why, and Victor replies that this child is the chosen one. They go together to the forest and reach a tree with a strange shape. Victor places a ball with a smiling face inside the tree. Suddenly, the ball appears behind them, as if the tree has the ability to transport the things inside it to other places. Victor says that the tree can transport humans, but the place they arrive at is unknown. They continue walking in the forest and see the small child that Ethan saw before, but he suddenly disappears. Then they hear the sound of a dog in the distance. Suddenly, a memory of a dog Victor saw when he was young comes to him, and he tries to remember more about that moment. At that moment, Matthew and Tabitha discover that Ethan is not at home, so they start searching for him everywhere. They head to the forest, where they find a dog barking loudly, realizing that Ethan is in danger. The search continues until they find him with Victor, who fires into the air to scare the dogs away from them. Matthew gets angry with Ethan and warns him not to talk to strangers. Then they go back home. Matthew and Tabitha decide to inform the mayor about what Victor did. The mayor plans to hold a meeting with Victor's supervisor to discuss the matter. Meanwhile, Victor returns home and searches through his drawings to try to remember the dog he saw in his childhood. He organizes his drawings according to the events he remembers and tries to connect them with each other. After a while, the mayor meets with Matthew and Tabitha to discuss Victor's actions, but Kenny barges into the meeting and asks the mayor to come with him for an urgent matter. At the same time, Matthew and Tabitha sit together and exchange apologies for their past disagreements. In the restaurant, Sarah is sitting and suddenly feels something strange moving in the veins of her hands. Words appear written on her hand saying, "Kill the child." Sarah becomes dizzy and loses consciousness. Elsewhere, Victor is busy digging in front of Colony's house. Dawn watches him and wonders about his actions, as he seems to be scaring people in a mysterious way. He answers her that he is preparing for what is to come. At the hospital, Sarah's brother, Ethan, goes to visit her after hearing what happened to her. Christy takes care of her and reassures everyone that she will stay with her all night. During that, Sarah asks Christy, if you had to do something terrible to save the people trapped in the city, would you do it? Christy replies that she would do it if the goal is to help many people. On the other hand, Jade is trying to fix the radio, which he considers his only hope for communicating with the outside world. He seems to be the only one who cannot accept the idea that he is trapped in the city, and he wonders why the others do not try to escape or even protest against this situation. Sarah comes to Tabitha's house and plays with Ethan, while Tabitha sits with them. Sarah suggests to Tabitha that she take Ethan to the farm so he can relax. Tabitha agrees and tells her she's ready to go with them. In the Colony house, Fatima and Julia go to enjoy their time by the lake, and In the Colony house, Fatima and Julia go to enjoy their time by the lake, and Fatima talks about her life before she was imprisoned in the city. In the cemetery, the mayor visits his wife's grave and speaks to her while trembling, saying that his time has come, indicating that he will die. But at the same time, he is contemplating an idea that would allow the strangers to leave the city and return to their homes in peace. In the church, Nathan decides to confess to the priest what Sarah did in the clinic. He tells him that she intends to kill Ethan, explaining that the writing that appeared on her hands was like commands controlling her and forcing her to carry them out, otherwise everyone would die. The priest feels a great shock and hurriedly accompanies Nathan to search for Sarah before she harms Ethan. They discover that she is at Tabitha and Ethan's farm. At this time, Sarah is telling Tabitha and Ethan about the state of the city before the creatures appeared, forcing people to hide since sunset. She tells them that the city is full of hideouts and mentions that there is a special secret hideout behind their barn. She asks them to go with her to see the hideout. When they arrive, Sarah asks Tabitha to enter the bunker to try it out, but suddenly she locks her inside, leaving leaving her alone with Ethan. Sarah pulls out a scalpel she had been carrying and tells Ethan that she is very sorry and that she loved him very much. At that moment, Nathan arrives and manages to stop her, while Ethan kicks her with his feet and quickly escapes from her. Nathan tries to catch Sarah before she reaches Ethan, but she tries to free herself, and in the process, she accidentally kills Nathan with the scalpel she is holding. Nathan falls to the ground and bleeds to death. Sarah runs away quickly, while the priest watches the scene as he chases her. The news spreads among Matthew and the townspeople who head to the farm. Issa arrives at Colony's house to learn what happened to his sister. At the farm, Tabitha is very sad about what happened to Nathan, who was defending her son. She writes a question on the wall of the house saying, "Did we really survive the accident?" When Christy learns what happened, she feels guilty because she believes that her answer to Sarah's strange questions is the reason for what happened. The priest who was chasing Sarah returns and tells everyone that he couldn't catch her. Nathan's body is buried, and the priest tries to calm the townspeople. Meanwhile, Victor continues digging in front of his house, and it appears that the holes are taking the shape of graves. Tabitha goes to the priest at the church and asks him if Sarah can stay outside the house until tomorrow without being killed by the creatures. The priest tells her that she will probably die. After she leaves, the priest goes downstairs where he has imprisoned Sarah and tied her to a chair without anyone knowing. Elsewhere, Kenny and the mayor finish burying Nathan's body, and the mayor exploits what Sarah did to convince Kenny to take the talisman stone and walk through the forest as far as possible to find an exit from the city. But Kenny is not convinced by the idea and leaves. In the church, the priest decides to lock Sarah in a box as punishment for what she did. At Matthew's house, he discovers that the electrical wires are not real, as there are no wires inside the plastic itself. Suddenly, Jade enters Matthew's house with a radio and a large set of tools, asking for his help in fixing the radio. They gather items from Jade's car to help, but they discover that the car battery is missing. After fixing the radio, they choose a tall tree to place it on to get a signal. It turns out that Jade has a fear of heights, so Matthew decides to climb instead of him. While climbing, Matthew sees blood flowing from the base of the tree, and as he climbs higher, he finds a large number of corpses hanging from the branches of the tree, bleeding. He notices the same symbol he saw earlier drawn on the wall, and suddenly, the sound of a gun is heard, and a person in military uniform is seen aiming the gun at Jade. Jade tries to escape, but he gets shot, and the soldier approaches him to stab him in the chest with a knife. Jade screams in pain, but suddenly Masio appears and finds Jade lying on the ground without any real signs of injury on his body. Masio tries to calm him down and tells him that what he saw and felt is not real. At the same time, the mayor goes to the clinic to talk to Christy and starts to remember the scene of Mr. Liu being dead. Christy comes down from the upstairs and greets the mayor. The mayor asks her about Kenny's mental state after his father's death. It becomes clear that Christy and Kenny are engaged, and she tells the mayor that Kenny is trying to be the person everyone around him needs. The mayor expresses his concern because he knows his time is running out and he wants to ensure that the mayoral position will be in safe hands. In the church basement, Sarah tells the priest about the voices she hears, describing them as warnings of something bad that will happen, as if they are calling for help. She tells him that these voices belong to people imprisoned like her, and she is trying to follow their orders to save them. Sarah adds that these voices predicted the arrival of 2 cars in the city, and that's exactly what happened. The priest doubts her words and thinks she might have lost her mind, but he tries to find an explanation for what is happening. Suddenly, Sarah screams as if she sees something terrifying, then asks the priest for a piece of paper and says the voices want to deliver a message to him. In Matthew's house, Tabitha thinks of a way to get out of the city and suggests following the power lines that are supposed to come from outside the city. She descends into the basement and starts digging to reach the wires. At this time, Matthew is trying to pick up signals from the radio, while Jade arrives at Mrs. Liu's house and tells her what happened. Mrs. Liu searches through very old boxes and shows him a picture of the symbol that Jade saw elsewhere. The mayor tries to talk to Kenny, but the latter is sad and unable to speak. The mayor is forced to admit to him that he is sick and that he will die soon, and he asks him to be ready to take on responsibility at any time. In the forest, Matthew fails to pick up radio signals and returns home, only to find Tabitha in the basement digging for electrical wires. Suddenly, Tabitha asks him if he remembers the bracelet he made for her from his shoelace. Matthew remembers the bracelet and tells her that he lost it on Julie's birthday. Tabitha takes advantage of his memory of the bracelet and shows him that it is the same bracelet she found in a store that keeps the belongings of deceased people. Matthew insists that the bracelet only resembles him, but Tabitha insists it is the same bracelet and says they need to discover the reason behind their presence in this city and how they got there. She explains her idea about tracing the source of the power lines, and Matthew is convinced by her words and helps her with the digging. In the church, Sarah begins to draw what the voices describe to the priest to prove to him that she is not crazy. She draws a hole between the graves and describes a box that the priest had hidden long ago, certain that no one knows anything about it. When the priest verifies the matter, he finds the same thing that Sarah had drawn, which makes him believe that it is a means of communication between him and the spirit world. In the colony house, one of the young men hears the sound of a girl standing behind the window. When he opens the curtain, he sees a beautiful girl holding a large bouquet of flowers. The girl tells him that she loves flowers very much and asks him to let her into the house. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie starts in a hospital, and the doctor is very surprised. He says, "What's the point of all this for someone who just got bitten on the hand?" He then asks the nurse to check where the patient is. The nurse looks at the system and finds that the man has been sent to the intensive care unit, which is even stranger because a bite usually doesn't require intensive care. After finishing her shift, she goes home to her husband, Louis. Since they were both tired, they went to bed early. They didn't notice that the TV interrupted its program for an important news bulletin. The next morning, Louis wakes up and sees their neighbor Vivian standing outside their room. When he approaches her in the light, Louis is shocked to see her face covered in blood. He tells his wife to call an ambulance immediately and moves toward the girl to help her. Suddenly, Vivian bites him on the neck. The wife runs and pushes Vivian into the hallway. Louis falls on the bed, but Vivian keeps trying to attack. The wife is terrified and quickly locks the door. She checks on her husband and covers his wound with a pillowcase. She then tries calling the emergency number, but the recording says all lines are busy. Meanwhile, Vivian is still banging on the door. Louis dies on the bed, but suddenly, within seconds, he wakes up again as a zombie and attacks his wife. She manages to push him away and grab the car keys before he starts throwing furniture. She runs to hide in the bathroom, but accidentally slips into the bathtub. She tries to open the window, but it's stuck. At that moment, the house goes silent. She moves closer to the door and calls her husband's name. Louis responds by breaking down the door and entering. She tries to open the window again, and this time, she succeeds. As she's climbing out, Louis tries to grab her, but she kicks him away before jumping out of the house. On the street, people are running in fear. Many houses are on fire, and explosions can be seen in the distance. She tries asking a neighbor for information, but the man tells her to stay away and threatens her with a gun. Suddenly, an ambulance runs him over and drives off without checking on him. When Louis comes out of the house, she quickly gets into the car, but Louis jumps onto it and starts banging on the window. Thankfully, he falls off as she starts driving. Driving in the city is chaotic because other drivers are acting recklessly, and some people are throwing themselves in front of cars, begging for help. The radio announcer advises people to stay indoors, lock all doors and windows, and mentions that even military bases are not safe. Eventually, she reaches the main road where there are more accidents and explosions, not to mention zombies attacking anyone they see. She screams when someone suddenly opens the car door to pull her out. She pushes the man away and tries driving again, but during the struggle, the car veers off the road and crashes into a tree. As the zombie apocalypse takes over the world, authorities try to communicate with the press but can't figure out what happened or how to resolve the situation. People begin rioting in the streets, demanding the government take action. The military is deployed to cities to try to control both humans and zombies. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and buildings explode daily. When she regains consciousness, she finds a police officer named Kenneth, who makes her say something to confirm she's not a zombie. They walk together and meet 3 other survivors. The group initially fires at them until realizing they are not zombies either. The 3 survivors explain that they've tried many routes, all filled with zombies. The group decides to head to the mall as the safest option. While trying to break into the mall, some zombies approach. Kenneth shoots the lock, and they manage to get inside. Before they can lock the door, a zombie grabs Kenneth, but he quickly kicks it out, and the door is finally secured. They turn on the lights but find that the phones aren't working. They discover they're in a store with locked doors, so they throw something at the window to enter the main mall. Anne washes the blood off herself in a fountain. The group checks the main doors to ensure they're locked. Andrea and Michael volunteer to check other entrances, while the rest guard the main entrance. At the back entrance, Andrea is startled by a zombie pressed against the glass, but thankfully the glass is shatterproof. Michael grabs a large hammer from a toy section before following noises behind a door. A zombie jumps on him, knocking him to the ground. The hammer falls and breaks, but Michael manages to push the zombie's mouth away and stabs it in the head with a broken hammer handle. Back at the main entrance, a zombie grabs Andrea's pregnant wife, Luda. Kenneth shoots the creature, but a zombie grabs Andrea's pregnant wife, Luda. Kenneth shoots the creature, but it attacks him instead, pushing him into the fountain and injuring his arm during the struggle. Anne picks up Kenneth's fallen gun and shoots the zombie. The bullet hits its shoulder, creating a hole. The 3 run and regroup with the others, entering the elevator. When they reach the upper floor, they find 3 armed guards who initially refuse to let them in. After some argument, Anne convinces them to allow the group to stay, but the guards confiscate their weapons. On TV, they watch the chaos, death, and destruction taking over the world. They also learn that the only way to kill zombies is by shooting them in the head. One officer mentions a safe haven called Bastard, where Kenneth's brother works. Later, Andrea takes Luda to the bathroom and discovers a small wound on her arm. Since it's minor, he assumes it's nothing serious. Anne searches for a first aid kit while breaking down emotionally, but pulls herself together to treat Kenneth's wound. Michael suggests blocking any weak points in the mall and creating a rooftop sign for rescue helicopters. The guards go downstairs and see a zombie convulsing in the fountain. It turns out to be a former guard, and his friends are forced to shoot him in the head. They search other stores, killing any zombies they encounter. Afterward, the guards throw the zombie corpses off the roof, while the rest of the group finishes their SOS sign. From the rooftop, they see the entire city overrun with zombies. Hearing gunshots, they use binoculars to spot Andy on the roof of his gun shop. He holds up a sign saying he's alone, but lowers it to point at something in the sky. A helicopter passes by, and the group waves frantically, but the helicopter ignores them and flies away. At night, the guards lock the group in a store to prevent them from stealing anything. Michael insists they need to take action since help isn't coming. coming. But Andrea believes the helicopter will return. Kenneth doesn't care about the argument, as his only goal is to reach Baxter to find his brother. Meanwhile, the guards watch TV, where a preacher claims the zombies are God's punishment for humanity's sins. The next morning, everyone wakes up to the mall's automatic timers, which turn on all the lights and music. The TVs display static, indicating the signal cut off the guard. Terry went to check the control panel, and I saw him convince someone to open the shop so her group could go to the bathroom. Terry reached the control panel and turned off the music before checking the surveillance cameras. He discovered a truck was coming to the mall. When Terry informed everyone, they all ran to the roof and debated what to do. I said they should welcome any survivors, but CJ and Bart didn't want to trust anyone new. Terry disagreed with his friends, so Michael and Kenneth took the opportunity to overpower the other two guards, disarmed them, and locked them in the mall's cell. They fought and killed a large number of zombies until they ran out of bullets and had to retreat inside. Thankfully, the survivors in the truck were safe. They pushed the truck to the mall to climb on it and enter without exposing themselves to danger. Once everyone was inside, Anna announced she would check them for injuries, including 6 very sick individuals who had been pushing the truck. Kenneth wanted to take the truck to go to Fort Pastor, but Steve and Norman explained they had come from there, and the zombies had taken over that place too. Kenneth felt defeated and went to the roof, where he saw Andy communicating using another sign. Kenneth said the fort had fallen and no help was coming. Andy replied sarcastically, which made Kenneth smile. Meanwhile, Anna treated everyone's injuries, and Terry looked at the sick woman, who suddenly died. Anna confirmed her death after checking her pulse and covering her with a sheet. Suddenly, the woman sat up, and the group began to run when they realized she had turned into a zombie. Anna grabbed an iron rod, and when the woman got too close, she stabbed her in the eye. After seeing the transformation, remembering her husband, Anna told everyone that a zombie bite causes the infection. Frank had been bitten, and Anna wanted to isolate him, but Michael thought they should kill him before he turned. Kenneth agreed. Anna ran to warn Frank, and Nicole begged for mercy, but her pleas went unheard. They gave her a moment to say goodbye, then they locked Frank in a room. Kenneth waited for him to turn to confirm their theory before shooting him in the head. Days passed, and the group tried to entertain themselves. Kenneth played chess with Andy by writing moves on signs. Bart and CJ played cards in the cell. Anna enjoyed watching movies with Michael, and Nicole and Terry bonded while stargazing. Steve spent time with Monica when he wasn't playing golf on the roof. Sometimes the balls would hit the zoo. Sometimes the balls would hit the zombies outside. As the crowd at the mall's entrance grew each day, the group wrote requests on signs, and Andy shot the zombies they pointed out, showcasing his excellent aim. One night, the survivors were having dinner, sharing stories about the people they'd lost when the power went out. Andrea rushed to check on Luda, who was very ill, so he tied her to the bed. Later, 4 men went to check the generator and found blood on the walls. Something moved in the darkness, and the group prepared to fight until they realized it was just a dog. Michael called it over, and the animal seemed fine, but suddenly, it started barking. A zombie appeared on the roof, jumped on Bart, and bit his neck. All the noise attracted more zombies, who appeared at the end of the hallway. The group ran immediately, but it was too late for Bart, who was left behind as zombie food. Kenneth and Michael opened a gate to escape, and CJ shot a zombie in the face to close it again. They locked the door securely and opened fire on the zombies trying to climb the gate. With little ammunition left when a zombie fell, it took part of the gate with it. Michael found a gas can, poured it on the zombies, and CJ threw a lighter, causing a massive explosion that burned all the creatures. Meanwhile, Andrea watched as Luda took her last breath. When he looked at her pregnant belly, he was shocked to see the baby still moving, but he had to step back when Luda woke up as a zombie. Cautiously, Andrea found a belt and put it over Luda's mouth so she couldn't bite while giving birth. At the same time, Norma realized she hadn't seen Luda in a while and came to check on her, only to find Andrea with the baby and Luda growling in the bed. Norma immediately opened fire to kill Luda, and a furious Andrea shot back. Both ended up killing each other. The rest of the group heard the gunshots and rushed to the room to hear Norma's last words. Terry wanted to shoot her, but Anna assured him she was dead from the bullets and wouldn't turn. Then they looked at the baby and discovered it was a tiny zombie. They had no choice but to kill it. After moving the bodies and fixing the generator, Kenneth told the group that waiting to die was worse than death itself. Anna said she didn't want to die there. Michael mentioned seeing buses in the garage, suggesting they could reinforce them to escape. Steve proposed sailing on his boat, and the group agreed that traveling to the nearest island was a good idea. They started using all the tools they found in the mall to fortify the buses, spending most of their time working hard. During breaks, they realized they had little ammunition left, but planned to bring Andy along since he might have extra weapons. Kenneth communicated the plan to Andy using signs, and Andy replied with hungry, indicating he'd lost a lot of weight. The group still needed time to finish the buses, so they had to find a way to send food to Andy to keep him alive until the escape. Remembering the dog was unharmed during the attack, they decided to send it with some supplies and a radio. Their theory was confirmed when the dog walked among the zombies without being attacked. But when Andy opened the door for the dog, zombies tried to get inside. Andy quickly fought them off and shut the door again. However, when he grabbed the radio, he told the group he had been bitten. Nicole panicked, drove the truck to the gun shop, and entered the building as zombies climbed the truck. The group heard Nicole rescuing the dog on the radio, and Kenneth looked at the gun shop roof, realizing Andy had turned into a zombie, his sign now covered in blood. When Andy went back inside, Nicole had to hide to avoid him. A few men decided to rescue Nicole, taking the opportunity to gather more weapons. They entered the sewers after leaving someone to guard the door. After walking for a while, they emerged in the middle of the street, immediately opening fire to clear their path. The zombies, Kenneth knew how to kill kill them. He killed a few enemies, but a zombie snatched the gun from his hand during the operation. The men climbed onto the transport vehicle to reach the other side. They entered the shop through the dog door and closed it before the zombies could reach them. After that, they grabbed as many weapons as they could carry. They followed a trail of blood on the ground until they found Andy knocking on the door. Kenneth apologized to his friend before shooting him in the head to save Nicole in the end. They needed a good plan to make their way back. So, CJ went to the roof, threw a fuel tank, and shot it to make it explode. The zombies caught fire. The group used the distraction to run through the street, shooting any creature that wasn't burning until they reached the sewers. Some zombies pushed Tucker, and he fell into the pit, breaking his leg. CJ told the others to go on while he stayed behind to help Tucker. The zombies jumped. The zombies jumped into the sewers too, so CJ shot a few of them before handing the weapons to Tucker. This way, CJ could drag Tucker on the ground while Tucker shot at the attackers coming their way. Unfortunately, there were too many of them, and they managed to reach Tucker and started eating him. Tucker asked his friend to finish him quickly, so CJ shot him in the head before running to catch up with the others. In the end, the group reached the mall door, but Steve wasn't there to open it. The zombies started climbing the stairs and the men opened fire. Finally, Anna appeared to let them in. They couldn't close the door again because the zombies were holding it. The team had no choice but to run. When they regrouped with the other survivors, the group, along with the dog, ran to the elevator and closed the doors before the zombies could reach them. They reached the garage and scolded Steve when they found him there. The group split into two to board the buses and escape the mall by breaking the garage doors. The zombies immediately surrounded the vehicles, making movement difficult. The survivors fired from the windows, and Steve even used a chainsaw to kill some zombies. Since the congestion was still heavy and they couldn't move, CJ threw another fuel tank and shot it to create a new explosion that cleared the path. The buses sped through the city, only being stopped by other vehicles. Kenneth saw a zombie hanging onto the bus and swerved suddenly to try to knock it off, causing Glenn to fall with the chainsaw onto Monica. The bus lost control and crashed into a wall, flipping onto its side. The second bus reversed to help them. Steve grabbed a gun and refused to help Kenneth, going off on his own, only to be attacked by zombies. The other survivors regrouped to save their friend. Anna was devastated when she discovered the chainsaw had killed Monica and Glenn. When she turned, zombie Steve tried to attack her, so Anna shot him in the head. Terry killed the zombies surrounding the bus, but the gunshots attracted a large group. The men opened fire to buy time for Anna, who was behind them, retrieving the boat keys from Steve's corpse. She shot a few more zombies with the help of her friends and reached the bus. Michael pulled her inside, and CJ killed the creatures at the door so they could close it. Finally, the bus sped off at full speed, crashing through the gate to reach the pier. The bus almost fell into the water, but luckily got stuck on the edge. The survivors started running toward the boats, with the zombies reaching the area too. Unfortunately, CJ was surrounded and ended up shooting the last fuel tank to take down all the enemies with him, dying in the process. The remaining group prepared to leave, but Michael announced he couldn't go with them because he had been bitten. He said goodbye to Anna, pushed the boat to safety, and then ended his life with a bullet. In the end, Anna, Kenneth, Nicole, Terry, and the dog survived. As they ran, they found a boat with zombies inside and quickly killed them. After many days, when their boat ran out of fuel and their food started to spoil, they reached an island, only to discover it was also full of zombies. The movie ends here. See you in the next recap. The zombies jumped into the sewers too, so CJ shot a few of them before handing the weapons to Tucker. This way, CJ could drag Tucker on the ground while Tucker shot at the attackers coming their way. Unfortunately, there were too many of them, and they managed to reach Tucker and started eating him. Tucker asked his friend to finish him quickly, so CJ shot him in the head before running to catch up with the others. In the end, the group reached the mall door, but Steve wasn't there to open it. The zombies started climbing the stairs and the men opened fire. Finally, Anna appeared to let them in. They couldn't close the door again because the zombies were holding it. The team had no choice but to run. When they regrouped with the other survivors, the group, along with the dog, ran to the elevator and closed the doors before the zombies could reach them. They reached the garage and scolded Steve when they found him there. The group split into two to board the buses and escape the mall by breaking the garage doors. The zombies immediately surrounded the vehicles, making movement difficult. The survivors fired from the windows, and Steve even used a chainsaw to kill some zombies. Since the congestion was still heavy and they couldn't move, CJ threw another fuel tank and shot it to create a new explosion that cleared the path. The buses sped through the city, only being stopped by other vehicles. Kenneth saw a zombie hanging onto the bus and swerved suddenly to try to knock it off, causing Glenn to fall with the chainsaw onto Monica. The bus lost control and crashed into a wall, flipping onto its side. The second bus reversed to help them. Steve grabbed a gun and refused to help Kenneth, going off on his own, only to be attacked by zombies. The other survivors regrouped to save their friend. Anna was devastated when she discovered the chainsaw had killed Monica and Glenn. When she turned, zombie Steve tried to attack her, so Anna shot him in the head. Terry killed the zombies surrounding the bus, but the gunshots attracted a large group. The men opened fire to buy time for Anna, who was behind them, retrieving the boat keys from Steve's corpse. She shot a few more zombies with the help of her friends and reached the bus. Michael pulled her inside, and CJ killed the creatures at the door so they could close it. Finally, the bus sped off at full speed, crashing through the gate to reach the pier. The bus almost fell into the water, but luckily got stuck on the edge. The survivors started running toward the boats, with the zombies reaching the area too. Unfortunately, CJ was surrounded and ended up shooting the last fuel tank to take down all the enemies with him, dying in the process. The remaining group prepared to leave, but Michael announced he couldn't go with them because he had been bitten. He said goodbye to Anna, pushed the boat to safety, and then ended his life with a bullet. In the end, Anna, Kenneth, Nicole, Terry, and the dog survived. As they ran, they found a boat with zombies inside and quickly killed them. After many days, when their boat ran out of fuel and their food started to spoil, they reached an island, only to discover it was also full of zombies. The movie ends here. See you in the next recap, and thank you for watching.
Died after the foggy dragon absorbed his soul. This was the fate of every traitor. Despite his betrayal, his friends mourned him. The teacher stood face to face with Huansha, and their battle was fierce. He fought with all his strength, trying to defend himself, but in the end, the teacher fell when Huansha summoned a water monster. Shai rushed to check on the teacher and attempted to wield the magical sword to fight the monster, but the sword was ineffective in the battle because he hadn't yet unlocked its power. He kept resisting and striking the monster, but of course the monster retaliated, trying to kill him. The big problem arose when the sword broke during the fight with the monster, as it was just an ordinary sword until its internal power was unlocked. At that moment, his friends Lingzi and Gui intervened, fighting the monster. The monster was incredibly strong, managing to overpower and injure them. Huansha clearly intended for this to happen and turned his attention to Shui, intending to kill, but suddenly Shui's mother appeared. Having heard the loud sounds coming from Maoshin's school, she saved her son from Huansha's attack, taking the low cell. The teacher, deeply upset, stood up once more to fight Huansha. Shui was devastated and wept over his mother's death. The two fought fiercely, each determined to defeat the other. The teacher was urged, then, driven by Shui's true mind along the power of the magical swords was charging with immense, and Shui managed to summon unleashed devastation. The teacher's astonishment. Shui outed him, he blames his sisters, and that our move. See you next time.
Died after the foggy dragon absorbed his soul. This was the fate of every traitor. Despite his betrayal, his friends mourned him. The teacher stood face to face with Huansha, and their battle was fierce. He fought with all his strength, trying to defend himself, but in the end, the teacher fell when Huansha summoned a water monster. Shui rushed to check on the teacher and attempted to wield the magical sword to fight the monster, but the sword was ineffective in the battle because he hadn't yet unlocked its power. He kept resisting and striking the monster, but of course the monster retaliated, trying to kill him. The big problem arose when the sword broke during the fight with the monster, as it was just an ordinary sword until its internal power was unlocked. At that moment, his friends Lingzi and Gui intervened, fighting the monster. The monster was incredibly strong, managing to overpower and injure them. Huansha clearly intended for this to happen and turned his attention to Shui, intending to kill him. But suddenly, Shui's mother appeared, having heard the loud sounds coming from Maoshin's school. She saved her son from Huansha's attack, taking the blow herself. The teacher, deeply upset, stood up once more to fight Huansha. Shui was devastated and wept over his mother's death. The two fought fiercely, each determined to defeat the other. The teacher was on the verge of being defeated, but then, driven by his inner rage, Shui's true power finally emerged, along with the power of the Julong sword. The magical sword was restored, charging with immense energy and releasing a powerful aura. Shui managed to summon the sword's golden dragon, which unleashed a devastating attack on Huansha, killing him instantly. The teacher was astonished by Shui's strength and his ability to control the sword's golden dragon. Shui, now confident and powerful, became the hero who defeated the evil Huansha. He became famous throughout the city as a student of Maoshin School of Martial Arts. And with that, our movie for today concludes. See you next time with a new Hey there, Cinemaster fans. Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. Our series begins in the town of Smallville with the Kent family, who, by chance, find a child inside a spaceship on their farm. Since they cannot have children, they decide to raise the child as their own. They name him Clark and are surprised later when they discover he has superhuman strength. They deal with the situation and try to live a normal life until Clark's father passes away. At that point, Clark decides to leave the town and move to the city of Metropolis, where he begins using his powers to help people. He also works as a journalist and meets a woman named Lois. After working with her for some time, he falls in love and decides to reveal his true identity to her. They eventually get married and have twin sons, Johnson and Jordan, whom they decide to keep the truth about their father from. The only other person who knows Clark's secret, besides Lois and his parents, is Lois's father, General Sam, who collaborates with Clark in saving the world. This is facilitated by a device that sends a signal only Clark can hear. One day, while Clark is at work, he receives a call informing him of the unfortunate news that his adoptive mother has passed away. He rushes back to Smallville to bid her farewell for the last time. His wife and children children later join him to attend the funeral, which is also attended by people Clark knew from his past, like Lana and Kyle, who were his schoolmates. They are accompanied by their daughters, Sarah and Sophie. After the funeral, Lana, who works at the town bank, informs Clark that his mother had taken out a loan, and since she was behind on payments, the bank might foreclose on the house and farm. Meanwhile, Jordan and Johnson are at the farm with Sarah. Jordan, trying to impress Sarah, begins exploring the area but accidentally falls. When his brother tries to save him, metal beams fall on both of them. Clark, with his super hearing, hears the commotion and rushes to the scene, finding them unharmed. This leads Clark and Lois to suspect that one or both of the twins may have inherited Clark's powers. Lois wants to tell them the truth, but Clark insists they are not ready yet. The next day, Clark and Lois meet with Lana to find a way to save the house and farm. Meanwhile, the twins return to the farm and, while exploring, discover a hidden underground chamber. To their surprise, they find the spaceship their father arrived in. When Jordan touches it, it activates, releasing a piece of kryptonite. When Clark and Lois return home, they find their sons waiting for them. The twins confront their father about hiding important secrets, revealing they found the spaceship. Clark is then forced to tell them the truth. He explains everything, from his arrival on Earth to his identity as Superman, even demonstrating his powers by lifting their car and flying with it. He explains that their recent experiences indicate that one or both of them may have inherited his abilities. He admits he kept the secret to protect them, but the twins struggle to accept this and walk away. Soon after, Clark hears a distress call from a nuclear plant and rushes there as Superman. Meanwhile, Jordan and Johnson attend a student party with Sarah. Back at the nuclear plant, Clark discovers he has walked into a trap set by a mysterious figure in a metallic suit whose strength far exceeds Clark's. Even when Clark chases him beyond Earth's atmosphere, the figure still overpowers him. At the same time, at the party, one of the students picks on Jordan, prompting Johnson to defend him, leading to a fight. When Jordan sees his brother being attacked, he becomes enraged and unintentionally emits destructive beams from his eyes, just like his father. During his battle, Clark is stabbed with kryptonite by the mysterious figure and loses consciousness. However, he manages to remove the kryptonite at the last moment and regains his strength. Hearing his sons in distress, he rushes to the party, where he finds that Jordan has accidentally caused a massive fire. Fortunately, Kyle and his firefighter team manage to contain the blaze. Clark takes his sons home, where Jordan confesses what happened. Clark explains that Jordan has inherited his powers and reveals that it was actually Jordan who saved his brother during the earlier incident. Clark advises Jordan to control his anger until he learns to manage his new abilities. After discussing with Lois, Clark decides that the family will stay in Smallville permanently so they can spend more time together and so he can train Jordan. Lois agrees, and the next day, they inform their sons of the decision. Elsewhere, the mysterious figure who attacked Clark is seen entering a spaceship in the South Pole. From his conversation with the ship system, we learn his name is Luther. Back at the Kent household, Clark talks to Jordan, informing him he will temporarily stay out of school until he can control his powers and avoid incidents like the one at the party. Meanwhile, Luther attacks a military facility, eliminating the guards and opening a vault, only to be disappointed when he doesn't find what he's looking for. From his conversation with the last guard, we learn he's searching for kryptonite and harbors a deep hatred for Clark, though the reason remains unclear. The next day, Lois drops Johnson off at school, while Clark takes Jordan to the South Pole, specifically to his fortress, where he learned about his origins. There, Clark uses the crystal Jordan retrieved from the spaceship, which contains a holographic memory of Clark's biological father, Jor-El. Clark introduces Jordan to the history of their home planet, Krypton, explaining its destruction and providing information about Jordan's powers and how to use them. And after Clark learns the truth about him, he takes him back home. There, he finds Sam talking with him about Luther. Clark says that Luther knows a lot about his life and wants to kill him, even though he himself doesn't know him at all. Clark tells Sam that they managed to locate Luther's ship for a few minutes, but it disappeared afterward due to its high speed. The surprise is that when they studied the ship, they discovered it was made of a metal not found on Earth. For this reason, Sam asks Clark to get rid of Luther quickly, as his danger is causing many problems in the world. On the other side, we see Lois at a town meeting, and we learn that the meeting was organized by a businessman named Edge. Before the meeting starts, Lois meets a woman named Chrissy, a journalist in town who runs a small newspaper. Knowing that Lois is a skilled journalist, Chrissy suggests they work together, but suddenly, during their conversation, Edge enters the meeting. From his speech, we understand that he has big plans and projects he wants to implement in the town. Since he promises jobs for the townspeople, everyone welcomes the idea, except for Lois, who calls him a liar. It turns out that she already knows he has destroyed many places with his projects, which often aim to exploit the land's resources. Despite this, Edge manages to convince the townspeople with his projects. After gaining their approval, the meeting ends, and he leaves. At the same time, Sam receives a call with information about Luther's location. Clark moves quickly to the location and attacks him with all his strength until he destroys his suit and is on the verge of defeating and capturing him. However, Luthor activates his ship, which is filled with explosives. As part of his plan, he directs it toward New York to save himself. His plan succeeds, forcing Clark to leave him and quickly take the ship out to explode outside the Earth's atmosphere. Of course, Luthor takes advantage of this moment and attacks Sam's headquarters. Despite the soldiers' attempts to stop him, he easily overpowers them. He then infiltrates the building and speaks with Sam, warning him about Clark and telling him that he is dangerous. From his words, we understand that Luthor is from another planet or parallel world. world. But before he can explain further, Clark arrives and attacks him. Clark keeps attacking until he defeats him, but when he goes to remove a piece of the suit, he finds no one inside. It turns out that Luthor is far away, observing everything. It seems he orchestrated all of this just to deliver the message to Sam. To understand Luthor's hatred for Clark, we see some of his memories. We see him in his world, serving as a soldier alongside Sam. The confusing part is that we see Clark attacking them and wiping them out. In town, Lois meets Chrissy, accepts her offer, and agrees to work with her since she wants to expose the truth about Edge to the townspeople. He can control his powers and avoid incidents like the one at the party. Meanwhile, Luthor attacks a military facility, eliminating the guards and opening a vault, only to be disappointed when he doesn't find what he's looking for. From his conversation with the last guard, we learn he's searching for kryptonite and harbors a deep hatred for Clark, though the reason remains unclear. The next day, Lois drops Johnson off at school, while Clark takes Jordan to the South Pole, specifically to his fortress, where he learned about his origins. There, Clark uses the crystal Jordan retrieved from the spaceship, which contains a holographic memory of Clark's biological father, Jor-El. Clark introduces Jordan to the history of their home planet, Krypton, explaining its destruction and providing information about Jordan's powers and how to use them. And after Clark learns the truth about him, he takes him back home. There, he finds Sam talking with him about Luthor. Clark says that Luthor knows a lot about his life and wants to kill him, even though he himself doesn't know him at all. Clark tells Sam that they managed to locate Luthor's ship for a few minutes, but it disappeared afterward due to its high speed. The surprise is that when they studied the ship, they discovered it was made of a metal not found on Earth. For this reason, Sam asks Clark to get rid of Luthor quickly, as his danger is causing many problems in the world. On the other side, we see Lois at a town meeting, and we learn that the meeting was organized by a businessman named Edge. Before the meeting starts, Lois meets a woman named Chrissy, a journalist in town who runs a small newspaper. Knowing that Lois is a skilled journalist, Chrissy suggests they work together, but suddenly, during their conversation, Edge enters the meeting. From his speech, we understand that he has big plans and projects he wants to implement in the town. Since he promises jobs for the townspeople, everyone welcomes the idea, except for Lois, who calls him a liar. It turns out that she already knows he has destroyed many places with his projects, which often aim to exploit the land's resources. Despite this, Edge manages to convince the townspeople with his projects. After gaining their approval, the meeting ends, and he leaves. At the same time, Sam receives a call with information about Luthor's location. Clark moves quickly to the location and attacks him with all his strength until he destroys his suit and is on the verge of defeating and capturing him. However, Luthor activates his ship, which is filled with explosives. As part of his plan, he directs it toward New York to save himself. His plan succeeds, forcing Clark to leave him and quickly take the ship out to explode outside the Earth's atmosphere. Of course, Luthor takes advantage of this moment and attacks Sam's headquarters. Despite the soldiers' attempts to stop him, he easily overpowers them. He then infiltrates the building and speaks with Sam, warning him about Clark and telling him that he is dangerous. From his words, we understand that Luthor is from another planet or parallel world. But before he can explain further, Clark arrives and attacks him. Clark keeps attacking until he defeats him, but when he goes to remove a piece of the suit, he finds no one inside. It turns out that Luthor is far away, observing everything. It seems he orchestrated all of this just to deliver the message to Sam. To understand Luthor's hatred for Clark, we see some of his memories. We see him in his world, serving as a soldier alongside Sam. The confusing part is that we see Clark attacking them and wiping them out. In town, Lois meets Chrissy, accepts her offer, and agrees to work with her since she wants to expose the truth about Edge to the townspeople. He can control his powers and avoid incidents like the one at the party. Meanwhile, Luthor attacks a military facility, eliminating the guards and opening a vault, only to be disappointed when he doesn't find what he's looking for. From his conversation with the last guard, we learn he's searching for kryptonite and harbors a deep hatred for Clark, though the reason remains unclear. The next day, Lois drops Johnson off at school, while Clark takes Jordan to the South Pole, specifically to his fortress, where he learned about his origins. There, Clark uses the crystal Jordan retrieved from the spaceship, which contains a holographic memory of Clark's biological father, Jor-El. Clark introduces Jordan to the history of their home planet, Krypton, explaining its destruction and providing information about Jordan's powers and how to use them. And after Clark learns the truth about him, he takes him back home. There, he finds Sam talking with him about Luthor. Clark says that Luthor knows a lot about his life and wants to kill him, even though he himself doesn't know him at all. Clark tells Sam that they managed to locate Luthor's ship for a few minutes, but it disappeared afterward due to its high speed. The surprise is that when they studied the ship, they discovered it was made of a metal not found on Earth. For this reason, Sam asks Clark to get rid of Luthor quickly, as his danger is causing many problems in the world. On the other side, we see Lois at a town meeting, and we learn that the meeting was organized by a businessman named Edge. Before the meeting starts, Lois meets a woman named Chrissy, a journalist in town who runs a small newspaper. Knowing that Lois is a skilled journalist, Chrissy suggests they work together, but suddenly, during their conversation, Edge enters the meeting. From his speech, we understand that he has big plans and projects he wants to implement in the town. Since he promises jobs for the townspeople, everyone welcomes the idea, except for Lois, who calls him a liar. It turns out that she already knows he has destroyed many places with his projects, which often aim to exploit the land's resources. Despite this, Edge manages to convince the townspeople with his projects. After gaining their approval, the meeting ends, and he leaves. At the same time, Sam receives a call with information information about Luthor's location. Clark moves quickly to the location and attacks him with all his strength until he destroys his suit and is on the verge of defeating and capturing him. However, Luthor activates his ship, which is filled with explosives. As part of his plan, he directs it toward New York to save himself. His plan succeeds, forcing Clark to leave him and quickly take the ship out to explode outside the Earth's atmosphere. Of course, Luthor takes advantage of this moment and attacks Sam's headquarters. Despite the soldiers' attempts to stop him, he easily overpowers them. He then infiltrates the building and speaks with Sam, warning him about Clark and telling him that he is dangerous. From his words, we understand that Luthor is from another planet or parallel world. But before he can explain further, Clark arrives and attacks him. Clark keeps attacking until he defeats him, but when he goes to remove a piece of the suit, he finds no one inside. It turns out that Luthor is far away, observing everything. It seems he orchestrated all of this just to deliver the message to Sam. To understand Luthor's hatred for Clark, we see some of his memories. We see him in his world, serving as a soldier alongside Sam. The confusing part is that we see Clark attacking them and wiping them out. In town, Lois meets Chrissy, accepts her offer, and agrees to work with her since she wants to expose the truth about Edge to the townspeople. Understand why Luthor is attacking him and wants to kill him. Luthor tells him everything about his world, how it was destroyed, and that, based on the information he has, the Kryptonian army has already begun to form. He warns that, just as it happened in his world, Clark will join them and destroy the planet. Shockingly, Luthor states he won't say anything else unless Lois is present. Clark is surprised and asks him why, but Luthor angrily insists, saying he won't allow her to meet him because he doesn't trust him. Luthor becomes agitated and reveals that Clark killed her in his world. He shocks Clark further by telling him that Lois was his wife, and they had a daughter named Nat. Meanwhile, at the Kent farm, Lois and Jonathan decide to investigate Luthor's car, hoping to find anything that could help with the investigation. They discover photos and videos of Luthor in his world, and they are stunned to learn that Lois was his wife in the alternate world. Lois is even more shocked to find out they had a daughter. Lois quickly calls Clark and tells him about the information she found, which confirms Luthor's story. Strangely, Luthor's words seem to have deeply affected Clark, making him fear he might turn into the same person in this world as well. But Lois reassures him, emphasizing that he is entirely different from his alternate version. Curious about the other world, Jonathan sneaks into Luthor's car alone. There, he finds photos of Nat, who is supposed to be his sister, and videos of his mother, who is also a journalist. By chance, he watches a video showing his father's alternate version killing her. This revelation shocks Jonathan, and he starts calling for his mother or father. Even when Lois hears him, she can't help it. She uses a device to summon Clark, who arrives instantly and enters the car. At the last second before Jonathan is killed, Clark saves him, shielding him from all the bullets. He quickly takes him outside to safety. A few days later, Luthor is still in custody, and Sam is interrogating him. Luthor tries to influence Sam with his words, telling him that the Superman he allies with killed his daughter in the alternate world. If he wants to stop him in their world, they must work together and eliminate him before he turns and destroys their world as he did his own. It seems Luthor's words have indeed affected Sam, as he stops the interrogation and goes to speak with Clark. Meanwhile, Luthor is escorted by two soldiers to his cell, but suddenly, one of the soldiers kills his companion, revealing himself to be a transformed follower of Edge. He has specific orders concerning Luthor. Strangely, this soldier takes Luthor with him to a weapons warehouse. Before entering, Luthor activates an alarm, knowing the soldier is part of the Kryptonian army and wants to stop him. Sam and Clark are alerted to the situation, but Sam warns Clark about the location they are in, revealing it's the same setup designed to contain Superman. This entire place is filled with Kryptonian weapons that can kill him easily. Despite that, Clark still goes there. The problem is that as soon as he arrives, the soldier working for Edge is waiting for him, wearing a mask to protect himself, and attacks Clark with kryptonite gas. But luckily, Clark resists and manages to strike him, giving Luthor a chance to escape. However, with all the weapons the soldier has, he manages to overpower Clark. At this point, Luthor intervenes and finishes off the soldier himself. The disaster is that Luthor intends to kill Clark as well, but Lois arrives with Sam and the soldiers, stopping him at the last moment. After a lot of talking and several attempts, Lois manages to convince him not to kill Clark. Of course, after everything ends, Sam apologizes to Clark and tells him that Luthor's words had an impact on him and that he had to prepare. He was suspicious that Clark might turn against them and try to destroy the planet. He tells Clark that much of what Luthor said is true and explains Edge's plan and the machine that gives individuals superpowers. It turns out that the machine transfers the consciousness of a Kryptonian into a person on Earth. This means these individuals don't just gain superpowers, they literally become another person from Clark's planet with the same strength. Since Luthor was right in his statements, they release him from prison. He tells Clark that the war he talked about will likely happen soon, and when the time comes, Clark might need his help if he wants to save their planet. After their conversation ends, Luthor gets into his car and erases from the system any plans related to killing Superman. Time passes after these events, and Lois continues with her life. This time, Clark joins her, helping her and Chrissy as well. After what Luthor said, they want to stop Edge as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Edge continues with his plan, recruiting people from the town and convincing them that the machine makes them better individuals. But as we mentioned earlier, he's actually transferring the consciousness of Kryptonians to take control of humans. Since Lois needs more evidence, she has Lana meet with them, because Lana is now working with Edge, like the rest of the townspeople. It turns out that Lana has indeed noticed strange behaviors at work, such as people people disappearing for a while and returning completely changed. Because of this, she agrees to help them and relay any new information. At the same time, we see members of a gang robbing a bank. As usual, Clark intervenes and tries to stop them. But unlike usual, this time the bullets affect Clark to the point where he becomes very weak and passes out. However, after a while, he regains his strength, recovers, and quickly manages to take down all the gang members and stop the robbery. Lois is shocked when she returns home and finds Clark injured in front of her. Her surprise is, of course, because she knows his strength, and this is the first time since she's known him that he's been injured this way. On the other side, inside the school, Jordan is with Sarah, practicing the piano. Suddenly, while they're talking, Jordan sneezes and finds his breath freezing into ice. As the situation starts to escalate with him, his father is called to the school. The moment Clark sees him, he realizes something is wrong with both of them. They return home and try to take care of Jordan. From Clark's words, we understand that he's suspicious of the gas Jordan was exposed to inside the Department of Defense. He suggests that the gas might have caused him an illness or infected him with a certain virus. And since they are similar, the infection has spread and affected his own powers as well. Due to Lois's frustration with what's happening, she calls Sam to meet her, holding him responsible because he ordered the manufacture of kryptonite weapons. Sam reassures them, saying that his scientists are studying the matter and will surely find a cure. Meanwhile, at work, Lana tries to talk to one of the town's residents, attempting to get her to reveal what Edge is doing with them exactly. Unfortunately, Leslie notices this and takes her to speak with Edge. The surprise is that Edge hints to her that he wants her to join them. It's likely he'll offer her to enter the machine and gain superpowers. Returning to Jordan, whose condition worsens minute by minute, to the point where his entire breath turns to ice, making it impossible for him to breathe. Since Clark doesn't know how to handle the situation, he takes Jordan to the fortress. There, Jor-El examines Jordan and understands what's happening to him. Fortunately, he knows how to treat him. He tells Clark that his son's body is filled with kryptonite shards, and to cure him, they need to burn them all out. Clark talks to his son, explains the plan, and tells him to prepare. While they're talking, rays emerge from the walls of the fortress, striking Jordan. After a few minutes, the process ends, burning all the kryptonite, and Jordan finally returns to his normal state, regaining control of his powers. At that time, in the town, there's a party inside the school. During the party, some of the town's residents start acting strangely and, without reason, leave the party altogether. When Lana notices what's happening, she calls Lois and tells her that a few people working with Edge left in the middle of the party, as if Edge is controlling them and giving them orders. She also tells her that Edge offered her to join them, but she refused. Because of what's happening, she warns Lois about Edge, saying he might try to harm her since she's investigating him. The problem is that while they're talking, two of Edge's workers enter Lois's house. Suddenly, they use their powers and try to kill her, but fortunately, Sam arrives just in time, throws a kryptonite bomb at them, and gives Lois and her son a chance to escape. Since Johnson was scared of what's happening, he takes one of the weapons Luthor had stolen. Meanwhile, inside the house, the two people working for Edge overpower Sam. Clark, still with Jordan in the cave, hears what's happening with his super hearing. He takes Jordan and flies to the house. There, Kyle, Lana's husband, also arrives, and the disaster is that he turns out to be under Edge's influence too. But fortunately, before he kills Lois and Johnson, Clark arrives. Since the Kryptonians fear him, they flee the scene. After everything ends, we see Kyle returning home, revealing that he doesn't remember anything when the Kryptonian persona takes over him. He tells Lana that strange things have started happening to him. He explains that he was at the party with them and suddenly felt dizzy. When he regained consciousness, he found himself outside the town, injured and in pain, as if someone had attacked him. Lana immediately understands that Kyle accepted Edge's offer and entered the machine. Back at the house with Clark, he investigates the Edge matter with Lois. From the evidence they have, they deduce why Edge chose the residents of Smallville. Clark explains that the town's residents are surrounded by meteor rocks everywhere. Since they've been there for a long time, they've affected the residents, making them the most suitable candidates for Edge's plan. The surprise is that while they're talking, Clark receives a signal. He flies to the source of the signal, which is in the middle of the desert. There, he finds Edge in front of him, wearing the attire of Krypton's inhabitants. The shock comes when Clark tries to stop him, but Edge pushes him away with ease. From their conversation, we discover that Edge didn't gain his powers through the machine. The bigger surprise is that we learn from his words that he is Clark's brother from the same planet. We find out that his Kryptonian name is Tal-Rho, and he tells Clark that their mother's name is Lara. However, Clark's father, Jor-El, is not Tal's father. We learn that Tal's father was an enemy of Jor-El, named Zeta, who sent Tal to Earth with a completely different goal than Jor-El's. That goal is to transform Earth into their planet, Krypton, beginning by transferring the consciousness of his father's allies into humans to create a personal army. An army he calls the Defense Council, whose mission is to take control of Earth. To convince Clark to join them, he tells him their mother will be with them. She is the one who invented the device that transfers Kryptonian consciousness. Despite this, Clark completely refuses. At that moment, Tal attacks him and escapes. Afterwards, Clark returns home, where he tells his family about Edge and explains everything. He says that everything Edge mentioned is coming true, and Edge is close to executing his plan and summoning the Defense Council to Earth. Since he doesn't know what to do, Clark goes to his father, Jor-El, who is upset with him for hiding the fact that he has a brother who has been around him all this time. He's also shocked by his mother because of the device she invented. Jor-El explains that Lara never intended for this to happen, and it's likely that Zeta deceived her and used her to implement his plan. Clark asks for a solution to stop Edge, but unfortunately, Unfortunately, Jor-El cannot help him. He tells him that the advanced technology and knowledge about it belong to Lara. Meanwhile, we see Lois visiting Lana to check on her. The moment Kyle sees her, he transforms and attacks her, but since Lois knows his weakness, she strikes him with a kryptonite stone on his neck. After that, Sam and the rest of the forces enter and arrest Kyle. It turns out that all of this was a trap to capture him and get information about Edge. The next day, they continue investigating the matter with Lana's help. At that point, they identify the doctor responsible for the operations turning the town's residents to Edge's side. The doctor works with them in the town, and his name is Danby. Of course, Clark immediately starts searching for this doctor until he finds him. He gets arrested along with all his strange equipment, including the advanced device used for transferring Kryptonian consciousness. As usual, Clark asks the doctor to find a way to reverse the device's work to restore the transformed individuals to their original states. However, the doctor tells him that the only person capable of doing that is the machine's inventor. Due to the ongoing events and the army's threat, a camp is set up in the town. Lana and Lois come to find a solution to the problem, but Clark already has a plan. His solution is for the doctor to help them summon Lara's consciousness, as she is the only one who can assist them since she originally invented the device. Since they need someone to host the consciousness, Lana volunteers without hesitation, wanting to help the town's residents and her husband, Kyle. With no other options, they all agree. After a few minutes, the doctor prepares the device for the operation. Lana enters the machine, and Lara's consciousness is transferred to her. Fortunately, the operation succeeds, and Lara emerges to speak with them. When she talks to Clark, she confirms Jor-El's words, explaining that the machine was not created to destroy another planet, but to preserve their consciousness until one of their descendants finds a suitable planet for life. At that moment, Tal and Leslie arrive at the location where the machine was, only to find it gone. Realizing what happened, Tal orders Leslie to summon all their followers and decides to initiate the next phase immediately, calling upon the Defense Council. Meanwhile, Lara works on the device since she invented it, and she manages to reverse its effects. This means that anyone who previously entered the machine can return to their original state if they enter again. However, she warns them that the process must be done quickly, as the Kryptonian consciousness will take control of the human body if it remains for too long. Since they don't know who entered the machine, the task seems impossible. Lara suggests another solution, modifying the device's effect to cover the entire town. However, this requires an enormous amount of energy. While discussing, Clark hears Tal moving, so he leaves them to finalize the plan and goes to confront him. Tal tries one last time to persuade Clark to join them, claiming that humans deserve what is happening to them. He recounts his experience when his spaceship first arrived on Earth. Humans treated him like a monster, tried to kill him, and when they failed, they imprisoned him and experimented on him. Knowing their true nature, he decided to take revenge. Years later, he escaped after the prison guards were destroyed. As they talk, the Kryptonians start flying out of the town, summoned by Natalie to eliminate Clark. Unable to face their numbers, Clark flees but devises a plan during his escape. He retrieves the device's energy source from the camp and flies with it. When the Kryptonians attack, he uses their combined strength along with his own to reach the required energy level for the device. A massive explosion ensues, covering the entire town. The plan succeeds, and everyone returns to their original state. Kyle is seen talking to his daughter, unaware of what happened or how he got there. Across the town, everyone who had transformed reverts to their original selves, including Lana. Unfortunately, the soldiers inform Sam that there is no trace of Tal. Meanwhile, Clark, exhausted from the plan's execution, faints at his fortress with the device's energy source. Tal meets Leslie, and their conversation reveals that their plan is not over. As Clark lies unconscious, he recalls memories from his arrival on Earth, meeting Lois for the first time and deciding to marry her. Suddenly, he wakes up terrified to find that Edge has reached him, placed a device from his planet on him, and is revealing all his memories and everything about the person in front of him. Knowing Clark's identity and family, Tal threatens him, demanding his surrender and allegiance, or he will eliminate his family one by one. He tries to convince Clark that they should rule the world, revive their planet, and replace humans. Jor-El intervenes, urging Clark not to listen. This enrages Tal, who destroys the crystal containing Jor-El's memory. With his father gone forever, Clark attacks Tal in anger, but Tal's strength far surpasses his. Tal easily overpowers him, beating him until he loses consciousness. Tal then goes to the town to confront Lois, now aware that she is Superman's wife and that their two sons are his children. Jordan, the only one with superpowers, tries to defend his family but is easily defeated by Tal's strength. Just as Tal is about to finish them off, Clark arrives. Knowing he cannot win against Tal, Clark surrenders, promising to comply with his demands if Tal leaves his family alone. After Tal agrees, Clark bids farewell to his family, and the two fly away. Tal takes him to his fortress, which he built using the crystal he arrived with. Similar to Clark's fortress in the ice, like Clark, Tal can communicate with his father, Zeta, and they begin their plan to transform Clark through torture. They succeed in changing him. Meanwhile, Lois contacts Irons, admitting he was right about everything because the events from his world are now happening in theirs. However, it becomes clear that Clark has not fully surrendered. Despite the changes, he resists and returns to his original self. Tal continues to threaten him, trying to weaken and break him to complete the transformation. At home, Lois is devastated and unsure of what to do. Even Sam admits they cannot locate Clark. Lois recalls a conversation with Clark days ago about Tal and learns from him that Tal's fortress is in the desert. Sam shares this information information with his soldiers, hoping it will lead to something. The next day, Jonathan talks to Jordan, suggesting that since Edge won't easily reveal their father's location, Jordan should use his super hearing to pinpoint Clark's location and inform Sam so they can help him. And shortly after, Luther arrives upon receiving Lewis's message. Of course, Louis and Sam talk to him about a plan to save Clark, but Luther is completely convinced that they must kill him because if they try to stop him before killing him, he will destroy the earth entirely. Due to his words, Lewis becomes angry and says she will find a way to bring him back to his true nature, even if he has transformed. She asks them to locate him while she comes up with a plan. The shock is that after she leaves them, Sam tells Luther he agrees with his words, and it turns out he had already given orders to prepare all the Kryptonian weapons while they were talking. They take Luther to his car, where he shows him a weapon he invented, a weapon capable of stripping any Kryptonian of their powers, giving them the chance to subdue and kill him. Meanwhile, Tal is still trying with Clark. Despite his strength and the power of the place, Clark manages to resist because of his memories with his family and his help to humanity. It becomes difficult for him to transform, and because he feels himself collapsing, he tries to escape from Tal. He takes the opportunity to get outside and calls out to his son with all his might. Fortunately, Jordan hears him and manages to locate him, but since Tal hears them, he tells Jordan that it's too late, and by the time they reach his location, they will find his father waiting for them, ready to confront them himself. Meanwhile, at the military base, Louis meets a man named John, who we learn is one of the strongest and smartest soldiers alongside her father. When they enter, they discover that Sam has activated the emergency plan. This, of course, shocks Lewis, as her father is considering killing Clark. While they are talking, the twins arrive to inform them of what they heard. They tell them that Jordan heard his father calling out and learned from him that he is in the desert, specifically in a place called Badlands. But they also relay Tal's words, which are that by the time they find their location, their father will have already transformed. Since Lewis is worried about Clark, she goes to talk to Luther, admitting to him that Superman is actually her husband, Clark. She is likely trying to gain his sympathy, as he is the one executing the plan. But Luther tries not to let emotions influence such an important decision for the world. He also tells Louis that he saw Superman kill her in front of him, which is why he cannot promise her anything. After finishing his conversation with her, he goes to Sam, and they begin executing the plan. On the other side, Clark has almost completely collapsed. Unfortunately, he can no longer resist, and his transformation is complete. Thus, Zeta is close to achieving his goal and executing his plan. At the same time, Sam's soldiers manage to locate Clark. The shock for everyone is when Superman appears before them in his evil form, attacking Luther without hesitation and trying to kill him. This prompts Luther to confirm to them that Superman has indeed transformed. Here, Sam gives him the green light to execute the plan. Luther begins attacking him, using all his weapons, but during their fight, Luther notices that Clark is resisting. When he becomes certain that Superman is not like the one from his planet and does not kill him, on the contrary, he keeps talking to him about Louis and his children, giving him more motivation to fight for them and not transform. The surprise is that Clark manages to destroy the evil energy within him. After fainting for a few seconds, he regains consciousness and returns to his true self. Luther communicates with the operations room, reassuring them that Clark has not transformed. Meanwhile, Zeta, in his fortress, hears everything that is happening. Since this plan has failed, he tells Tal to start the second plan. Tal takes the piece containing Kryptonian consciousness and flies outside, but he doesn't get far because Clark and Luther chase him. Before Tal can execute the second plan, Luther shoots him with one of his invented missiles, causing Tal to lose his powers and fall to the ground. Clark follows him, strikes him, and knocks him unconscious to take him to prison. Finally, Clark returns home to his family after everything has ended. As for Tal, we see him inside a high-security military prison, with his cell made of kryptonite so he cannot use his powers. Since the energy source and the core of the device were with Tal, Clark comes to ask him about it, not knowing that the core had exploded due to Tal's power during the chase. It seems its explosion was part of Tal's plan. As usual, Tal refuses to cooperate with Clark and reveals nothing about what happened to the core. Since Luther helped Clark, he goes to thank him. From their conversation, we learn that Luther is currently staying on the farm with Clark, but only temporarily until he decides whether to settle in their world or try to return to his own. The surprise comes when, during their conversation, Luther's devices detect a signal. It becomes clear that a Kryptonian is heading toward the Department of Defense headquarters. Clark and Luther quickly head there. As Clark approaches the headquarters, he discovers that the attacker is Leslie. He attacks her, stopping her before she can destroy the headquarters. Luther joins him, striking Leslie and knocking her unconscious. Her fate will undoubtedly be the same as Tal's, and she will be imprisoned. Afterward, Clark goes to speak with Sam, who informs him that the Kryptonian weapons project has been halted. In a few days, all the manufactured weapons will be destroyed. The surprise is that Clark opposes this decision. He tells Sam that during the moment Tal transformed him, he had no control over himself at all. He fears transforming again, and this time, he might not return to his true self. That's why they must keep these weapons in case they need them to kill him. Since Sam is alarmed by Clark's words, he calls Lewis to inform her of what Clark said, asking her to check on it. Of course, Louis is upset by Clark's actions. She returns home, angry, and tells him that what he did not only puts his life at risk, but also endangers their son Jordan, as he shares the same weakness. Clark explains that he fears what happened in Luther's world could happen in theirs, and if he transforms and the weapons are available, no one might be able able to stop him. Since both of them have valid points, they decide to agree on a compromise. Instead of leaving the weapons with the Department of Defense, they decide to entrust them to someone else they trust, since Sam might leave at any time and no longer be responsible for the weapons. After much discussion, they agree that the trusted person is Luther. Clark then goes to speak with Luther, informing him of their agreement. He tells him that since he helped them and refused to kill him, he is the most suitable person for the task. Since Luther is staying in their world temporarily, he agrees to Clark's request. At the same time, we see Tal behaving strangely in his cell, as if the explosion of the device's core had affected him in some way. The disaster strikes when his powers suddenly surge inexplicably. Since he is under constant surveillance, the soldiers notify Sam of what is happening. Sam sends an entire team to secure the cell. They are shocked to find that Tal can now use his powers, and even the kryptonite cell can no longer stop it. Tal uses his newfound strength to destroy the cell and all the surrounding soldiers. Afterward, he easily breaches the facility and flies away. At that moment, Sam calls Clark to take action. As soon as he learns that Tal has escaped, he goes out to search for him. But after a few hours, he returns to Sam and tells him that Tal has disappeared. Even though he searched the entire planet, there's no trace of him. Tal near the sun, drawing energy from it to become stronger and execute his plan. The next day in the town, we see Sam angry with Lois. It turns out that the newspaper she works for published an article about the army forces, stating that the army has turned the town into a military base. Lois explains that their presence in the town harms its residents, as shop owners have started closing and moving to other cities. If Sam wants to stay longer with his soldiers, he must tell the people the truth. But Sam refuses because the truth would cause panic and chaos everywhere. Meanwhile, Tal is still charging his power from the sun, and from the energy aura around him, it's clear he has reached an incredible level of strength. After reaching this stage, he prepares to execute his plan. Back in the town, all the residents gather inside the school. It turns out that Lois arranged a meeting for Sam to talk to the townspeople, hoping to reassure them and reduce the problems caused by the soldiers' presence. However, the residents' only demand is for the soldiers to leave the town, as their presence scares customers and affects business overall. But Sam says they can't do that for now and can't explain the reasons, to avoid causing fear among the residents. Here, Lois intervenes and decides to tell the truth. She informs the people that Tal managed to escape, and because of this, the army decided to stay in the town to protect them. The problem is that while they are talking, Tal attacks the army base. After defeating all the soldiers, he enters to free his assistant, Leslie. Because of this, a soldier informs Sam that he is urgently needed at the command center. Of course, Sam ends the meeting abruptly and heads there. Seconds later, Clark and Luther join him after learning what happened. From their surveillance of Tal, they inform Sam that Tal is currently in Metropolis. Indeed, we see Tal flying in the middle of the city with his assistant Leslie. When Clark arrives, he notices a strange energy on his brother and realizes what happened. He says that Tal has merged the consciousness of the Kryptonians into himself. The surprise comes when, during their confrontation, 4 more Kryptonians appear among the people. Tal orders them to destroy the city to distract Clark. Meanwhile, Luther attacks Leslie and keeps an eye on Tal. Clark begins fighting the Kryptonians, taking them down one by one. As usual, Lois climbs a building and plays her role as a journalist, recording the events and warning the city's residents. All this happens while Clark and Luther continue their battle with the Kryptonians. The disaster is that the situation in Luther's W. Ars's Zrenia, all the manufactured weapons will be destroyed. The surprise is that Clark opposes this decision. He tells Sam that during the moment Tal transformed him, he had no control over himself at all. He fears transforming again, and this time, he might not return to his true self. That's why they must keep these weapons in case they need them to kill him. Since Sam is alarmed by Clark's words, he calls Lois to inform her of what Clark said, asking her to check on it. Of course, Louis is upset by Clark's actions. She returns home angry and tells him that what he did not only puts his life at risk, but also endangers their son Jordan, as he shares the same weakness. Clark explains that he fears what happened in Luther's world could happen in theirs, and if he transforms and the weapons are available, no one might be able to stop him. Since both of them have valid points, they decide to agree on a compromise. Instead of leaving the weapons with the Department of Defense, they decide to entrust them to someone else they trust, since Sam might leave at any time and no longer be responsible for the weapons. After much discussion, they agree that the trusted person is Luther. Clark then goes to speak with Luther, informing him of their agreement. He tells him that since he helped them and refused to kill him, he is the most suitable person for the task. Since Luther is staying in their world temporarily, he agrees to Clark's request. At the same time, we see Tal behaving strangely in his cell, as if the explosion of the device's core had affected him in some way. The disaster strikes when his powers suddenly surge inexplicably. Since he is under constant surveillance, the soldiers notify Sam of what is happening. Sam sends an entire team to secure the cell. They are shocked to find that Tal can now use his powers, and even the kryptonite cell can no longer stop it. Tal uses his newfound strength to destroy the cell and all the surrounding soldiers. Afterward, he easily breaches the facility and flies away. At that moment, Sam calls Clark to take action. As soon as he learns that Tal has escaped, he goes out to search for him. But after a few hours, he returns to Sam and tells him that Tal has disappeared. Even though he searched the entire planet, there's no trace of him. Tal near the sun, drawing energy from it to become stronger and execute his plan. The next day in the town, we see Sam angry with Lois. It turns out that the newspaper she works for published an article about the army forces, stating that the army has turned the town into a military base. Lois explains that their presence in the town harms its residents, as shop owners have started closing and moving to other cities. If Sam wants to stay longer with his soldiers, he must tell the people the truth. But Sam refuses because the truth would cause panic and chaos everywhere. Meanwhile, Tal is still charging his power from the sun, and from the energy aura around him. It's clear he has reached an incredible level of strength. After reaching this stage, he prepares to execute his plan. Back in the town, all the residents gather inside the school. It turns out that Lois arranged a meeting for Sam to talk to the townspeople, hoping to reassure them and reduce the problems caused by the soldiers' presence. However, the residents' only demand is for the soldiers to leave the town, as their presence scares customers and affects business overall. But Sam says they can't do that for now and can't explain the reasons, to avoid causing fear among the residents. Here, Lois intervenes and decides to tell the truth. She informs the people that Tal managed to escape, and because of this, the army decided to stay in the town to protect them. The problem is that while they are talking, Tal attacks the army base. After defeating all the soldiers, he enters to free his assistant, Leslie. Because of this, a soldier informs Sam that he is urgently needed at the command center. Of course, Sam ends the meeting abruptly and heads there. Seconds later, Clark and Luther join him after learning what happened. From their surveillance of Tal, they inform Sam that Tal is currently in Metropolis. Indeed, we see Tal flying in the middle of the city with his assistant Leslie. When Clark arrives, he notices a strange energy on his brother and realizes what happened. He says that Tal has merged the consciousness of the Kryptonians into himself. The surprise comes when, during their confrontation, 4 more Kryptonians appear among the people. Tal orders them to destroy the city to distract Clark. Meanwhile, Luther attacks Leslie and keeps an eye on Tal. Clark begins fighting the Kryptonians, taking them down one by one. As usual, Lois climbs a building and plays her role as a journalist, recording the events and warning the city's residents. All this happens while Clark and Luther continue their battle with the Kryptonians. The disaster is that the situation in Luther's W. Instead, she encounters Zeta inside his mind, who discovers her intentions. Zeta signals Jordan's body to wake up quickly, and as soon as he sees Johnson in front of him, he attacks him, choking him and flying him into the air to kill him. All the while, Lois tries to reach Jordan and finally finds him deep in his mind, completely resigned. She starts talking to him and motivating him to regain control. Fortunately, the plan succeeds, and Jordan returns to his normal self. Before killing Johnson, Jordan regains control at the last moment and brings him back to the ground. On the other side, Clark and Luther are still battling the Defense Council soldiers. After defeating them, they head toward the mine where Tal is. As soon as Clark reaches him, he attacks and restrains him. Meanwhile, Luthor throws the hammer from a great distance to gain immense power. With this power, they manage to stop Tal and completely end his plan. However, it seems that Luthor used the last of his energy to complete the mission. As a result, his suit malfunctions, and he is on the verge of falling to the ground and dying. Luckily, Clark saves him at the last moment. After their attack on Tal, they find him on the ground, completely powerless. Undoubtedly, his fate will be imprisonment next to Leslie, as usual. As for the townspeople, after everything is over, they return the town to how it was. Clark goes to have an interview with Chrissy at the newspaper to reassure the townspeople and the world that they managed to stop Tal, and there is no longer any fear of him. Because of this victory, they hold a celebration in the town. From a conversation with Luther, we learn that he has resigned. He wants to spend his remaining days away from the troubles happening around him. When Lois talks to Luther, we find out that he plans to return to his world. He heads back to the farm and prepares his suit for the mission, but before he even moves, the system detects a ship approaching from afar. Indeed, when they go outside, they find a ship landing in front of them. The surprise is that Natalie, Luther's daughter, emerges from the ship. He had thought she was dead in their world and had no hope of seeing her again. This means that Luthor and his daughter will likely remain in the same world. And that's it. This was the end of the first season of our series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to Hello to all Cinemaster lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. The movie begins with this strange man taking out a bullet and placing it on the bar. The girl becomes tense the moment she sees the bullet. He says to her, "Tell me, when is a door not a door?" She replies, "I don't understand." He repeats, "When is a door not a door?" Another man interjects, saying, "She doesn't understand what I mean. Let me explain again. When is a door not a door?" She answers, "When the door is open." He says, "Exactly, like one of these." She looks behind her and he says, "This is the game I've been searching for. It has distinctive marks, 3 spiraled baskets connected." She says, "We don't know who you are or what you're talking about. Get out of here." He looks at the spice containers and says, "These containers are made from the wood of a sacred tree. This tree's wood was used to hold Keystone. Keystone is a spirit of deception." She responds, "What are you talking about? These containers are filled with spices." Her colleague asks, "So why are you here?" The man replies, "You know why I came here, dumper." At that moment, everyone in the restaurant draws their weapons. The girl grabs the container and runs. The man chases her, shooting her in the leg. She falls to the ground, and the container slips from her hands. She looks at him, and her eyes begin to change. Dumper Booker grabs her and runs, filled with rage. He transforms and flies, but he is eventually brought down. Hey Carrie screams as the man retrieves the container. She warns him, "You won't be able to control it." The container moves on its own. The spirit inside it says, "Free me from here." The man responds, "Not before you make me a promise." The spirit replies, "You want revenge on him, his companions, and everyone he loves. I'll give you what you want, but first, free me from this cursed container." He agrees, and they leave together. The scene shifts to a group preparing to save the girl and her dog. Indeed, the alpha approaches the girl, and she warns him, "Don't come near the dog. It will bite you." He kneels, and the dog, initially aggressive, calms down when it looks into his eyes. Suddenly, the place begins to collapse. The girl climbs onto his back as he transforms again. He takes the girl and jumps up, returning her to her parents, who are overjoyed to have her back. They treat the dog, and one of them says, "Close the shop. Let's leave." As the shop is closed, a woman stands in front of the door. The man turns to look again, but she has disappeared. He enters, and Arjan appears, pointing a weapon at him, ready to kill. But Scott grabs his hand and embraces him. He asks, "Why didn't you come through the front door?" Arjan replies, "I never use the front door. It's not safe." Scott asks, "Who told you it's not safe?" Arjan responds, "Don't play dumb. You see it too. It's like you're dreaming about it." He continues, "For years her image appeared to me, but it was faint, unclear. 2 weeks ago, something changed. The image became as clear as daylight. I saw her screaming, suffering, and in pain before me. I realized her face was vividly clear. Then I began to hear her voice, and someone whispered in my ear." Scott asks, "What are you talking about?" Arjan replies, "Exactly what I'm telling you. There's a word I hear when I'm about to sleep, or as soon as I wake up. That word is Bardo." Shocked, Arjan explains, "Do you know what this word means?" "It means between life and death." Scott exclaims, "Impossible. Allison died before my eyes." Arjan responds, "This must be a message from her because she's still alive." Scott asks, "After 15 years she's still alive?" Helm says, "What should we do now?" Arjan replies, "There are rituals to perform. I know a little about them. Everything we need can be found at Hills. These rituals must be done during the full moon. If we miss this chance, we won't get another." Helm warns, "These rituals are ancient and very dangerous." Scott declares, "End of discussion. We'll perform the rituals and save Allison." Helm says, "This message is for you. It's your decision whether to act on it." Arjan adds, "It's more than a message." He opens a box and says, "This is the sword that killed Allison." Scott responds, "If none of us can handle this mission, I'll bring my old friends to help us." Meanwhile, a man is with an employee, holding Allison's file. He asks, "Who is this Allison?" She looks at the file and finds her name in a specific place. She enters her office and starts writing strange things. At the same time, someone steals a Jeep. The sheriff is informed about the theft. He says, "Let me be the one to tell his father." Drake enters and comments to the sheriff, "You were right. The fire wasn't caused by gasoline. It was a chemical substance." The sheriff says, "Your son stole the Jeep again." At that moment, the thief stops at a traffic light. He notices something strange and follows it, only to find. He notices something strange and follows it, only to find the car stopped with a flat tire. His father arrives and says, "I won't pay for the mess you've caused." The son retorts, "You will." Suddenly, the sheriff and his deputy arrive. Meanwhile, Scott reaches the location where Allison died. Lydia comes to him. She says, "Thank you for coming." She hugs him and pulls out the paper she wrote in her office. She tells him the first thing they need is some soil from the place where she died. Scott hits the ground and takes some soil. They wrap it in a piece of cloth. Then, they go to meet Allison's father. As soon as Lydia takes out the papers, Jackson enters. Scott asks him, "What are you doing here?" He replies, "None of your business. Lydia called me and asked for help, so I came for her." Lydia thanks Jackson. Jackson takes the papers and spreads them out on the ground, trying to figure out the drawings. Eventually, the drawings form a tree. Lydia says, "What is this?" "The sacred grove." Meanwhile, Malia is with her boyfriend Parrish. Lydia texts her, "Call me." Malia tells Parrish, "Sorry, I have to leave now." She leaves and goes to meet Lydia and Scott. After greetings, Malia says, "Let's go find what you're here for. By the way, are you searching for the tree at night or during the day?" No one answers her, so she sits on the ground and says, "This isn't the direction of the tree. This is the direction." Scott warns them, "Be careful. Someone is following us." He goes back and catches the person. Malia recognizes him and says, "That's Derek's son." The boy asks them, "What are you looking for?" Malia says, "Walk lightly." He replies, "Don't be vague. I know exactly what you're looking for. You're searching for the tree, right?" Malia asks, "Can you take us there?" He says, "The tree isn't far from here. Let me show you." He leads them to the tree. Lydia pulls out the sword that was used to knight Allison. Scott asks her, "What's wrong? Are you feeling something?" She replies, "Something strange." Suddenly, dust flies off Scott and he runs to the tree. The sword flies out of Lydia's hand and embeds itself in the middle of the tree. Then, the sword disappears and everything becomes calm. They wait for a long time, but nothing happens. Frustrated, they start to leave. Scott calls them back. They turn around and see a gap behind the tree. Suddenly, Allison appears on the tree. Everyone is in complete shock and disbelief that Allison is alive. They take her to the car and leave. Scott takes her to his mom at the hospital. Meanwhile, the monster goes to the tree. The sword emerges from the tree again. The monster says, "Finally, chaos, conflict, and pain." At that moment, Allison regains consciousness. She doesn't understand what's happening around her and remembers nothing about her life. Allison leaves the room and walks away. Scott and his friends search for her. Malia finds her, but Allison performs a move to escape and runs away. She encounters 2 police officers, takes down the first, and knocks out the second. Scott arrives and is overjoyed to see her. He runs to her and holds her, but she tells him, "Don't touch me." They stare at each other, and the scar on his face disappears. She punches pinches him and asks, "Who are you?" He replies, "I'm Scott McCall." She asks, "Scott who? Where's Derek?" She throws scissors at him and runs away. Her father appears in front of her, but she doesn't recognize him. She prepares her gear but hears someone moving. She goes inside and finds the monster. She asks, "Who are you?" He replies, "I'm your ally." She says, "But I don't know you." He says, "Allison, it's time for revenge. I want you to kill the werewolves and Scott who destroyed my family." She says, "Scott? I don't remember that name." He assures her, "You will remember everything and I'll help you." She says, "But I don't trust you." He changes his form to resemble her mother and says, "Surely you trust your mother." She says, "You're lying. My mother is dead." The monster hugs her and says, "I'm here for you. You must eliminate Scott and Derek, who have killed many innocent people and destroyed our family." Meanwhile, Derek is sitting with his son. Suddenly, an arrow is shot at them, but Derek pulls his son down and the arrow hits the cabinet. Allison enters with a knife, but someone else intervenes and says, "Allison." She tries to attack, but they throw her aside. She attacks with an arrow to the neck and he falls to the ground, seemingly defeated. However, Dumper catches the arrow before it reaches him. She shoots another arrow at him, but this time it grazes her shoulder. She turns and burns him. At that moment, Scott and Malia arrive. Allison escapes from them. Derek tells Scott to leave him and go after Allison. They take Derek to the hospital. Meanwhile, the monster and his allies attack the precinct, taking down officers one by one. The monster vanishes. At the same time, Peter heals Derek with fire. Peter heals Derek with fire. Scott moves to rescue Allison. She tries to attack Allison, but she skillfully counters and defeats him. She prepares to shoot him with an arrow, but Scott arrives just in time and tells her, "Enough, Allison." She shoots an arrow at him, but he deflects it with his hand. Scott takes Allison and runs away. She chases them, but hides behind a car. Scott says, "We need to run. To heal your wound, you need to transform." He transforms, and his wound heals. Allison continues to chase them, but Scott and Allison return to Derek. Meanwhile, the monster and his allies attack the monastery. The remaining members confront Dumper and Hikaru on the road. Dumper gets angry, and his body begins to transform. Hikaru draws her sword, and the fight begins, with no one gaining the upper hand. The black ones are in the forest, and no one can confront them. But the officer is finishing them off, and they're also finishing off Derek. They disappear. Derek's son and Malia try to escape, but his son also gets caught. At that moment, Malia pulls the curtain, and as soon as they see the light, they vanish. Scott takes a hit on the field, but Scott is injured in his chest. Badie puts her hand on his face, but the beast appears to her. He tells her his state, but history is full of criminals like him. At that moment, everyone who was killed finds themselves tied up in a strange place, still alive and not dead. Scott tells her, "You died in my arms, and if you want me to prove my words, I'm ready to prove it." She tells him, "You're a liar." He tells her, "Give me a chance and I'll prove it. And if you don't believe me, let me die." She tells him, "If I give you the chance," he tells her, "then you have to save me." And indeed, she helps him. And she brings that flare to cauterize his wound. She burns the wound, and from the intensity of the pain, he screams. His beast friends hear his cries. Lita tells them something is wrong. The beast creates a barrier between our world and hers. Parrish is the only one who can break that barrier. And indeed, Parrish transforms. He tries to break the barrier. At the same time, Allison and Scott are busy fighting the men. The beasts surround Allison, and it's a mistake that they kill her. But Lita uses her powers, screams, and finishes off the beast entirely. At that moment, the Marks remember everything. They recall their love for each other. They remember her father and mother. But the beast tells them the game isn't over yet. He has his hands on Derek's son. Scott tells him, "Let them go and take me instead." He tells him, "All the souls here belong to me." He tells him, "All you need is me. Take me and leave them. Let the Marks kill me, and I'll die in her arms just like she died in mine. That way, you win the game." He tells him, "I've already won." He tells him, "You've lost because you won't win unless I'm out of the game, but I'm still in the game and still the same as before, like the Alpha." He tells him, "Let Allison shoot you with an arrow in your heart to save her soul and the rest of her friends." And indeed, Allison shoots an arrow at him, then another, and another. Scott falls to the ground. Allison runs to him, and indeed the beast leaves him. The beast tells Scott, "What does it feel like to die as a wolf?" He tells him, "Who said I'm going to die?" Scott uses his supernatural powers and burns the arrows in his heart. The beast is shocked. Scott showcases his skills and gives the fiery wolf power to Hikari. Allison raises the bow and strikes the beast with an arrow in his head. The beast screams, and Parrish arrives at the place at the right time. The beast reveals his true face, and everyone stands in shock. Scott and his men transform, and they all gather around him. At that moment, it's Parrish's time, who, with the fiery power, can finish him off. Everyone holds on to the beast, but no one can stop him. Derek throws Scott and his son. He tells Parrish, "Finish us both." And indeed, Parrish uses the fiery power. He finishes off the beast on his own. Derek sacrifices himself to save his friend and finishes off the beast. Everyone is deeply saddened by Derek's death. Scott and his beloved return through the door, and Liam takes his father's place. And here the movie ends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The second part follows the story of Captain Young, who was in a car with his sister, her son, and her husband, Young. They were trying to escape from Busan because zombies had spread everywhere. At this point, a news anchor announces that those who believed Busan was virus-free were mistaken, as zombies had taken over every corner of the city. The government had only one more day before completely losing control of the city. Young is seen running towards a ship, managing to board it. All the healthy residents board the ship to leave the country. Meanwhile, Young is sitting when a soldier approaches him, saying the president wants to meet him. As Young leaves the room, one of the passengers turns into a zombie, causing panic among the others. Young hears the commotion and realizes there's a zombie among the passengers. He rushes to check on his sister to see if she's safe, only to find her son infected and his sister crying beside him in despair. Young notices that all the passengers are turning into zombies. He tries to take his sister away to protect her, but she refuses to leave her son alone. Young leaves and locks the door behind them, but her son bites her, infecting her, and the others attack her as well. At this moment, Young arrives to find his wife and son transformed. In shock, he tries to enter and help them, but Young stops him, leaving him devastated. More than 4 years after the incident, the story shifts to China, specifically Hong Kong. Young is seen in a room, penniless and without status, living as a semi-homeless man in China. A gang breaks into his room to kill him, but he defends himself and fights them off. One gang member stops the others, saying their leader wants to meet Young. Young surrenders and goes with them, finding Young there as well. The gang leader enters, sits, and tells them he's brought them together for their mutual benefit. He explains that Korea has been in quarantine for 4 years and no one can enter or leave the country. There is a truck containing $20 million, which he urgently needs. Young argues that the plan is insane because the countries surrounding Korea control its borders and no planes are allowed in or out of Korean airspace. The leader responds, saying they can bribe the border guards to gain access. He also reveals the last known location of the truck and promises each of them $2.5 million if the mission succeeds. After the meeting, Young and Young contemplate the mission. Feeling desperate as homeless individuals in China, Young convinces Young that they must take on the mission to escape their dire situation and live a happy, peaceful life. They agree to proceed with the mission alongside the gang. Young and the gang board a ship, preparing their weapons. The leader's assistant explains that zombies can't see at night but can hear even the faintest sounds. He promises to drop them off at the port to begin their mission and provides them with a wireless communication device, instructing them to contact him upon locating the truck. After a long journey, they arrive in Korea. The team disembarks and tests a car, which works. They drive through the city, discovering it to be a ghost town. While exploring, they find a truck matching the leader's description. Young checks the vehicle number, but it doesn't match. Suddenly, Young hears a noise behind him and sees a group of zombies gathered in one place. He returns to the car and reports that the truck isn't the one they're looking for. They continue driving until they find another truck. Young, and another team member check the vehicle's number, which matches perfectly. Upon opening the truck, they find the cash as described by the leader. While inspecting the truck, a driver who had turned into a zombie suddenly awakens and attacks Young. Young shoots the zombie, killing it, but the gunshot attracts more zombies. Young fights them off, but is overwhelmed by their increasing numbers. The team quickly boards the truck and drives away with the money. However, a zombie sets off a firework, illuminating the city and revealing their location to all the zombies. The team tries to run over the zombies with their car, but the high speed causes the vehicle to overturn. The truck behind them crashes into their car, flinging Young out of a window. Zombies spot him and attack, forcing him to fight them off. Meanwhile, Young finds a way to hide in a truck and locks himself inside. As Young fights the zombies, a woman named Wind and her younger sister Yoon arrive in a car. Wind tells Young to get in if he wants to survive. He joins them as Wind drives at high speed, running over zombies in her path. Young is puzzled by the situation and the sister's presence. Wind drives into a tunnel, where Yoon warns her of a large group of zombies ahead. Yoon devises a plan to distract the zombies using her toy, which emits light. Wind drives into a tunnel, where Yoon warns her of a large group of zombies ahead. Yoon devises a plan to distract the zombies using her toy, which emits lights and music. She can control it using the remote. When the zombies see it, they start chasing the game until they exit the tunnel, but a few zombies remain. Wind turns on the car, drives fast, and runs them over. Meanwhile, we return to Young, who is inside the truck surrounded by zombies from all sides. He can't escape and remains scared. Suddenly, a car with lights and music appears. The zombies hear it and chase after it. Then, other cars appear, belonging to a group called 631, a team of soldiers turned criminals due to the situation. We learn that they took the truck carrying money. Here, we return to Young, who is unconscious. When he wakes up, he sees someone pulling him. Young gets scared, thinking he will be killed, but he recognizes the person, whose name is Kim. Kim asks Young, "You seem new to this area. What brought you here?" Before he answers, Ween's mother, whose real name is Min, appears. She asks Young, "What are you doing in this virus-infected country?" They keep pressing him with questions, so he decides to tell them his story. When they hear his story, they are shocked and surprised by his self-sacrifice. Now, we go back to the criminals, the 631 group. They took the truck to their fortified base. They are a gang of survivors unaffected by the zombies. When they took the truck, they thought it contained food and drink. Suddenly, they hear a sound inside the truck. When they open it, Young comes out. They take Young to the wrestling arena. While searching the truck, they find a bag filled with money. Young is taken to a strange place where he sees severely mutilated corpses. He becomes terrified and horrified. The events shift to Young, who asks the family about the 631 group. They respond, saying that the group was initially formed to rescue civilians but lost hope and turned into savage people who kidnap others. They force their captives into wrestling matches with zombies for entertainment. An old man tries to contact someone to send a rescue plane, but it is futile. Wind tells Young that all communications in Korea are cut off. There is only one device left, located in the truck with the money. Young realizes that the only way to escape Korea is through the wireless device in the truck. Meanwhile, someone informs the leader of the 631 group, named Sue, that the truck they found is full of dollars. Sue becomes ecstatic. We see Young being stripped of his clothes, and the number 61 is written on his body. He is placed in a container where he notices others with numbers written on them. A whistle blows, the container door opens, and Young finds himself in a chaotic arena. He doesn't know where he is. The scene shifts to Sue talking on the phone, saying he doesn't care who he's speaking to as long as he gets the money. We learn that this phone was taken from Young and his team, who had no phones. Young is placed in the wrestling arena, where zombies are released to attack and bite them. He tries to escape, but is forced back into the container when the countdown reaches 0. Meanwhile, Young and Win's family head to the truck with the money and wireless device, knowing they can't leave Korea without them. When they open the truck, they find the money intact, but the wireless device broken. They had lost the second device in the same truck. At this moment, Sue's assistant arrives at the truck. Young grabs him and demands to know where the second wireless device is. The assistant reveals that it is in Sue's office. Young leaves quickly to retrieve it. Back at the arena, Young is in the second round of zombie fighting, trying to avoid being bitten. Meanwhile, Sue arrives at the truck, and Wind threatens to kill his assistant if he doesn't hand over the second device. Sue fires at her and tries to escape, but Wind blocks him with the car, knocking him down. She manages to take the device from him and hits him in the face. Now, we return to Young in the wrestling arena, killing zombies to save Young and the others. He throws smoke bombs to escape unnoticed by the zombies and frees everyone exploited by the 631 group. Young releases the zombies to attack the 631 group, killing them one by one. Someone shoots at Young, but Young shields him, taking the bullet and dying. Young is devastated and enraged, killing more of the group. One gang member tries to kill Young, but Wind intervenes with the truck, killing him. She takes Young, and they escape. While driving, they encounter zombies and run them over. Due to the overwhelming number of zombies, the truck stops. Wind arrives in another car, distracting the zombies with lights and leading them away. Wind returns to kill the remaining zombies, while the father uses flares to keep them at bay. Their plan works. On the way, Young contacts the ship, saying they'll reach the port in 15 minutes. They are surprised. Component placement. Young contacts the ship, saying they'll reach the port in 15 minutes. They are surprised to find the 631 group pursuing them. Young recalls the place he first landed, fires a shot, and breaks the glass. The zombies attack the gang, killing them all. Young and the family continue their journey. A car crashes into Wind and her sister's vehicle. Sue emerges, threatening to kill the girl. Young distracts Sue with a small car, allowing Wind to escape. Sue shoots the mother in the leg and kills the father before fleeing. Young tries to kill Sue, but he escapes with the gang's truck to the ship. Sue is shocked when his assistant shoots him multiple times. Before dying, Sue reverses the truck out of the ship. The zombies hear the gunshots, attack the gang, and kill them all. The zombies try to attack Young and the mother, but the mother tells Young, "Take my daughters to a safe and distant place." Indeed, Young takes her daughters and escapes, while the mother starts killing anyone who follows them. Later, she gets into a truck, and a sound is heard, which attracts the zombies, causing them to attack her. At that moment, a helicopter arrives. The helicopter is from the United States of America. However, Young refuses to leave the mother alone. He goes back to save the mother from the zombies, attacking and killing them. Then, he throws a smoke grenade at, rescues the mother, and brings her back to her daughters. She reunites with them and hugs them. After that, they board the helicopter, which takes them to another, safer country. This marks the end of the movie. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get more new videos.